The Dominion Tech Support Manual says these are designed to connect via Ethernet cables. So why does it matter? Here's why it matters. How many of you guys had a chance to read Sidney Powell's lawsuit in the state of Michigan? It's about 75 pages. Good. Hopefully you went through that in detail. Because in there, it highlights some things that should be a concern to every single senator, every single representative, no matter what party you're a member of. And I'm telling you, all the data that I've collected here, I want to make sure it's clear that everybody understands. I've been working with Bernie Sanders supporters. I've been working with registered Democrats. I've been working with libertarians, independents, and Republicans of all stripes. The stuff that we're talking about here should not be just a concern for Republicans. This should be a concern for everybody who calls themselves an American. So in this context, I want to highlight the detailed evidence on this. Go read the affidavits that are put into that Sidney Powell lawsuit. I'm not going to go through in detail here. Bottom line is, if it's connected to the internet, you open the door to nefarious actors outside of this country. And that should be a concern to everybody. Furthermore, we discovered that the National Institute of Standards and Technology left the proverbial key under the mat, essentially provided a map for anybody. By the way, first, before I get into that, we found admin passwords for the Dominion voting system, and the testimony attests to that, available up on the dark web. People could get access to it. That's important because with this key under the mat left by a gentleman out at the NIST, it provided all the specs or the specific files to look for in these election systems and what their sizes were so that you could mask any abnormal traffic that would happen when you're hacking a system. So is there any corroboration to what could happen with somebody accessing this via the internet and what we observed out at the polls? Yes. We've got affidavits talking about computer or network anomalies that happened at these, including one error message that says, warning, this computer is being hacked. So, guys, this is really happened. It happened at the poll books for that. There's adjudicator, or I think it was the adjudicator stations that had the computers down for about a half an hour inside of Detroit due to a network-related issue. Furthermore, there's another data piece here that's not on here, but I talked early on about, we've got an affidavit that attests specifically to poll worker in Detroit that observed the precinct printout at the end of the day and noticed that there was a bunch of write-in votes for that particular precinct. And the thing that was odd about that is that they did not see one ballot with a write-in vote on it the whole time they were doing that. And they got an affidavit to that effect. So what does this all add up to? I'm just going to say this is a referendum. There's only two choices for each of you in this context. Number one, you believe in principle of constitutional governance, and you realize that chain of custody is broken, there's significant evidence of election fraud, et cetera, or, and I'm not saying this term lightly here, or there's an attempted coup. And those aren't my words. That's the word of a registered Democrat, Brian McCaffrey, when he made his observation as to what was going on in the Philadelphia Counting Board. Like I said, this should concern people of every party inside America. Any American citizen should be concerned about what they're seeing here. So what can you do as legislators? Well, I'm just going to give you what I would recommend, and you guys can take the steps that you believe is appropriate. There's a lot of people are trying to convince you right now that there's nothing you can do. It's been certified, move on. There's nothing else that you can go off and do. I'm telling you that's not the truth. The United States Constitution, Article 2, gives the legislature specific authority on how to allocate electoral college votes. That doesn't mean that the governor has any say in it. It means it's, and because of Article 6, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, Supremacy Clause, that supersedes anything we may have in statute here in the state of Michigan. Furthermore, Article 4, Section 4 guarantees a Republican form of government. A Republican form of government means the people elect their representatives, which implies that we've got integrity around the election process itself. I believe this is just a small sample that one chain of this overall chain of custody around this election was broken, and I just submit it to you for consideration. There are options before you, and I'd just like to yield the rest of my time here, if I could, for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Senator Colbeck. Questions from Vice Chair Lucido. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Colbeck. I appreciate you coming and offering your testimony. I had listened to you about the chain of custody. We use that in criminal law. When you break the chain of custody, you find that there's a flaw, and as such, it makes for a difficult conviction. In fact, you throw the case out.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your analysis, but I like to get to what's called substantive issues. You indicate that the vote tally affected the election. What offer of proof do you have? That's what they use in a courtroom. And I know this isn't a courtroom.
Yep.
This is a legislative process that you were a part of.
Yeah.
So, and I did talk to you on the phone, did I not, this weekend?
Yep.
And I want to make sure when you came with your testimony that you'd have offers of proof, because as legislators, we like to take that information, digest it, and bring it back to our districts, indicating what we've heard by the testimony, because this isn't out there, and I wish it was. I wish it was on TV right now, so that the people can hear exactly what these offers of proofs are. So you were down there, you were a poll challenger, you were looking at 800,000 votes that passed into Wayne County. Your vote tabulator, you said, or the vote tally, affected this election.
Well, I'll tell you, there's two pieces of evidence in that I talked about here today. Number one, I don't think anybody denies that there was a vote flipping that occurred in Antrim County. They're just curious as to what the cause was. So there's
Not to stop you, but we had the clerk testify.
Yeah.
Were you a party to that testimony?
No, I was not.
So when the clerk testified, she gave her analysis as the clerk. Whether she's right, wrong, or indifferent, we could only take value of what the testimony was.
Right? Same with us.
She at first indicated that it must be a computer program software glitch. Later on, she found that she must have opened up, and I think it was Senator Tice, but I'm not going to speak for her just yet today. But it was somebody that opened up and changed the ballot that was already locked into place and had two nonpartisan candidates or counties or two nonpartisan communities that they locked in, and that's what caused. That's what was said to us, whether it's right or wrong. And I do appreciate your depth and scope about being an engineer and having this amazing ability to go ahead and try to identify and articulate these issues. The next thing is the electronic chain of custody. I'm real interested in this. If I have a computer with a ether cable router, and therefore I would have the ability to be hacked, I think you called it. Tell us how we don't have an expert in computer software with computer hardware about the cable, rotor, and the hacking portion that we can all digest as citizens.
Yeah, well, number one, you need to have access after the fact. I mean, if they're not allowing me to inspect, and I was deliberately prohibited from getting close to a lot of these connections by one of the gentlemen that was up there and the configuration of the site, but I saw enough to indicate I could follow the connections between them. So, I mean, there's, when you, I don't know how much detail to go into on any of this stuff, but the bottom line is, if you're connecting, I can verify this physical connection between all those, the tabulators, the adjudicators, and the local data center with one another. We've already got Chris Thomas testifying that the local data center was connected to the internet. So the only question is, were there protections and layers in between that would give the appearance of an air gap? And I'm just telling you, I'm not the hacker that does this. I'm not a black hat that can go in and do this, but there are people that can do that.
I got it. So then it comes down to this.
Yeah.
How does one maintain the chain of custody in electronics?
Well, I think the only way to do that is what I was talking about, what usually happens in other precincts where the clerks are getting that information from an encrypted flash drive from a tabulator that's not connected to the internet, and then transferring that in a sealed envelope up to the county so that they can add it to the tabulator result to the other areas. That did not happen in Detroit. I never saw one flash drive transferred from a computer to another computer. There was a wall up on the wall all around the center. There's a red area that was supposed to be where they put out the final precinct tallies, just like you would see in most other precincts, if you will. That never happened. They had all the zero printouts from all the tabulators, which is good. So they had them printed up for the beginning of the counting day. but they never had the final tally printed up there at all. So I would be very curious, and this is an area that I think, frankly, the burden of proof is on the Secretary of State and the Board of Canvassers, which is how do you verify that you maintain the chain of custody? Because I'd be very interested in their answer on that.
The data transmission, and Mr. Chairman, going to Senator Colbeck's point, we are all elected. We all put a vote up on the board, and I've never seen a fraction, so thank you for sharing that, because we don't have fraction votes. We have one vote for our district.
Yeah, I was joking that sometimes you don't feel like your vote means as much as some other people's votes, but it's kind of, you know.
The data transmission, though, of the fractional vote, has anybody ever questioned the software company and asked them, is that a possibility?
To the best of my knowledge, no, but it's undeniable that that's something that they use it for.
I guess if I was to ask, I think they're using the software in 29 states. Is that correct?
It depends on where you look. I've seen anywhere from 28 to 30. Yeah.
Okay. So we're right in the ballpark, just maybe a wrong base. But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
has anybody asked the software company, including maybe the Attorney General of this state, could you explain how this fraction tallied? How it was possible that a fraction could even be thought about?
To the best of my knowledge, no, but I do know that the state of Texas refused to procure Dominion voting systems because of security vulnerabilities.
Thank you very much for your testimony, and it's great to see you, Pat.
All right,
Thank you,
thanks.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lucido. Senator Tice.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Senator Colbeck, for all your work. I know you've been almost nonstop on this, so thank you. First off, can we get your presentation?
He's got it.
Great. And then secondarily, we were speaking about Antrim County, and this is something that I've focused on quite a bit. So the issues that happened for her happened once she finalized the election and then realized there were candidates that needed to get added on to it. So she locked it, and then she unlocked it, changed it, and relocked it again. All over the state, there were courts that ordered things on ballots after that deadline. And so I'm wondering, has anybody that you're aware of done the analysis in those communities to figure out whether or not those are accurate representations of what we would expect out of those communities?
I don't believe it's been done, and this is why it's so concerning. If it was literally, if it wasn't for Bill Bailey saying something's wrong here, there never would have been a recount. We never would have identified this software glitch / clerical error / whatever you want to call it. So no, I anticipate that this is across the spectrum. And when you look at what actually changed in there, to testimony we were looking at earlier, this is affecting down ballot. I mean, I know we're all focused in on presidential race here, but man, I'm concerned all across the state for down ballot issues too.
To your point, it was way down ballot that she was making the changes.
Yeah.
It was at a township, no, it was at a village
School board,
level
yeah.
and then millage level. So you were at the lowest partisan, and then below that
Yeah.
is where the changes were being amended, and it affected all the way up to the top of the ballot. So I find that disconcerting, and I'm wondering if anybody's done the analysis on the other counties where changes were made last minute.
And gets into a whole topic of reform down the road, but I'll tell you, one of the biggest challenges to this whole thing, why there's delay in some of this information coming out, is we've literally had an army of volunteers trying to get the precinct by precinct results just for the presidential election. Then we're working our way down to U.S. Senate, to congressional races. It's tedious as heck, and a lot of people here are part of that data warrior crew that's pulling this data together. But there's no reason we shouldn't have precinct by precinct roll-ups at the state level available for data mining analysis like you're suggesting.
And then, so there are a couple of things. One of the other commentaries that you said talked about having no registered voters. I know that many communities create a separate, just kind of a separate area where they're doing all of the absentee tabulation. So you won't show any in-person voting at that tabulation, but everybody is going to be absentee. And sometimes, I think, those registered voters would be reported within their precincts rather than in the absentee counting board. So I think it's possible that that might be, but I don't know. So again, we need to dig into it further, and I thank you for coming forward very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tice. Senator Colbeck.
Yes, sir.
When it came to the Antrim County issue, did you observe the testimony of the clerk before the committees?
No, I haven't seen her specific testimony. I've been looking at some of the affidavits that were based on that testimony.
So, I asked this question at that time regarding how such an anomaly may have been observed in a precinct, a county, where the weirdness of the result would not be as readily observable as it was obvious in Antrim County. And while we had some trouble speaking the same language to each other, I mean, the answer is that the tabulators that receive the votes and print up the tabulation sheet, those didn't demonstrate the inaccuracy that the software analysis did for the unofficial vote count that was announced. And so when the Board of Canvassers would come together to certify the vote at a later time, they would have easily noticed that the tabulation sheets were not in accord with the unofficial vote count that was announced by the clerk.
Yeah.
And so are you disputing that that's a correct answer, or is that answer satisfactory to you as to how we can, I'm not saying that recounts or audits shouldn't occur, but I'm just saying that answer would seem to me to suffice to show that some anomaly between what the software announces the vote is versus what the tabulators, any discrepancy there would be noticed by the boards of canvassers.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
And so when I was in my engineering days, we do something called a failure modes and effects analysis. So I try to identify all the possible things that could go wrong. And in this, we think it's actually a design feature of Dominion to keep that tally in sync with the printout. So there's another step that happens in between, and that's kind of an all-important step. First, you scan it, then you allocate the vote, then it's printed. So in the translation between the scan and the vote tally itself, which is what gets printed on the card, which is supposed to correlate to the printout, as long as you make your transition or switch before that,
I understand
then,
that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
Yeah.
you. I understand that vulnerability theoretically.
yeah.
But in the case of Antrim County, the tabulator sheets were accurate upon rerunning the numbers. It was simply the software. So the idea that the software was changing both the tabulator and the computer announced votes didn't occur there. The tabulators turned out to be right on the money. It was just the other issue.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that what you're presenting isn't theoretically possible, but
Yeah.
at least in Antrim County, that theory is not evidenced by what occurred.
Yeah, and I'm just, when I did in my testimony, I wanted to highlight all the different possibilities from a technical perspective on how that could be done. There are forensic experts that can testify to that specifically. And this gets to a fundamental issue that we've had since day one on it, is getting access to this information to go off and do that detailed forensic analysis. And I don't think it's limited to Antrim County.
How do we move, though, from what's possible
Yeah,
to what's actually happened?
by getting access to that actual data.
And so
those compact flashcards in particular are very important to get
And
access
the
to.
chain of custody
Yep.
issues, I recognize
Exactly.
that. So, one other question, and then I have other members who are waiting. These possibilities, these possible vulnerabilities that you detailed seem to me to be undercut in Michigan. And I don't know other states, but at least undercut in Michigan by the fact that we maintain the paper ballots. And so the opportunity to recount and the fact that every election cycle there are random audits done
Yeah.
that have continued to validate that the software has been accurate would seem to undercut this possibility it's happening or being something somebody would attempt to do in Michigan.
This gets into a very complex discussion because now it's conceivable you can go back in and prepare whatever ballot tally you want in physical ballot form to match the numbers that you want to have in the physical in the final vote tally. It's possible to go off and map that together, which is one of the reasons why it's so concerning as to how sloppy it was in Wayne County in regards to the idea of poll books balancing with the number of ballots that were out there. So I just want to highlight that I've focused in on vote tallies as part of the key issue on it, but where you're going starts taking us upstream as well into the ballots themselves, because you're looking and saying, hey, these are what the ballots said, there's no discrepancy associated with it. Gets into a discussion of where did those ballots come from? What was the chain of custody around those ballots? What's the chain of custody between the ballots and the person who was supposed to have voted for that ballot? Did you maintain that in the poll book with the verification? So all I'm suggesting on this is that I'm just zeroing in on how the heck did you transfer the results from tabulator A upstream to county and other areas? Is there evidence to suggest that there's a concern, not just in Antrim County, but keep in mind the other testimony that was for 289,000 votes that were pushed out as the official vote tally or whatever from those 4 counties that exceeded the complete scanning capacity of those 4 counties during that time frame. That's an explanation that I'd really like to see. So the stuff you're talking about, it's going to get into a detailed discussion of everything upstream of that chain of custody.
But Senator, help me understand, if a person or persons had the ability to stuff the box,
Yeah.
you know, for, you know, just to borrow colloquialism.
Electronically, yeah.
To stuff the box with the paper ballots, as you're mentioning.
Yep.
Then what would the need be to have the software provide an accurate count? I mean, if you have the ability
For
to.
recounts. Yeah.
I guess I'm just, I don't, it seems like one or the other is all that's.
No,
I'm not sure
I mean,
why.
ultimately, when it's all said and done, I mean, you're going to go off and try to make sure that you have all this stuff in sync. Right.
I'm sorry, to members, I have one other question. And this is a follow-up to Senator Lucido's question earlier regarding fractional voting.
Yeah.
Do you have actual paper or screenshots or something that show a fractional vote and where it came from, what that's referencing specifically?
This is in the affidavit provided by Russ Ramslander, and what they were doing, and it's probably too complicated to go into here, although I do have a slide that kind of demonstrates a little bit of the path I can get into. But this is an actual printout from Dominion Voting Systems and in their translate or their feed to all of the news outlets, and there's a whole chain of command that they go through for this data. And I was never interested in that. I was interested in seeing the flash up on the screen that says percentage of precincts reporting what's the vote. But behind that simple number chase, there's a whole bunch of handoffs. And
Okay.
I think I've got this actually in a backup slide, so let me just double check here. Once you get an appreciation for all the different handoffs that this goes through, it starts making a little bit more sense. So let me.
Well, in the interest of everyone's time here, I mean, you said you've got it in the presentation, you've sent it to me, so I mean, I'll look for it. And you and I can talk offline too.
Yep.
So is it okay if we move to the next question?
Absolutely.
All right,
Yep.
Senator McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellent analysis, Patrick. Quick question. The integrity of our elections, you're right about that. It's not a Republican or Democratic thing. It's just too important. Where is the Justice Department? Why aren't they looking into it?
That's a good question. It really is. I know Attorney General Barr has got a letter that was submitted a couple months before the election saying we need to be bird dogging any issues of election integrity, and I've been pretty outspoken about my concern with the election. I've reached out to what do they call it, to Matthew Schneider in particular directly regarding here's some concerns we have. I put out op-eds out in the Detroit News to that effect, and all that's gotten me so far is being discredited by Judge Kenney saying because I was looking for voter fraud and found it that I'm not a credible witness. So I'm a little concerned about the lack of movement there, and there does need to be more engagement. But the bottom line is we do have a suit on the table right here in Michigan that's going to a federal court. That's the Sidney Powell lawsuit. We also have lawsuits that have been introduced by the folks at the Great Lakes Justice Center, and I'm affidavit in one of those lawsuits that's currently being considered by the Michigan Supreme Court. So there is legal action being taken. Why the prosecutors are not getting engaged in any productive capacity to this date, I can't attest to.
Yeah, it's very concerning. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Vice Chair Irwin.
Thank you, Chair. If you were a statewide candidate in Michigan in this last election, with everything that you believe about election fraud, and you were on the losing end, much like, say, President Trump or candidate John James, would you have requested a recount?
I've got doubts with the integrity of the recount process, so I probably would not have done that. And by the way, just to put this in context, back in 2016, when President Trump did win Michigan explicitly, and Jill Stein ordered a recount, I was just as adamant about pursuing election integrity in the wake of that. I had one of my staffers that was out in Detroit, same place where we identified a lot of other problems right now, and she was there present when they came up and identified a poll book that said 306 votes were cast, but there's only 50 ballots inside of it. So I've been concerned about this from even when our top of the ticket guy is the victor.
So you would not seek a recount, even though you believe there is fraud. You would seek remedy through the courts to just throw out votes and tally what was left? Is that your approach?
What I believe should be done, which was not done by the State Board of Canvassers and Wayne County Board of Canvassers, is a detailed forensic audit, because that's what a canvass is. It's an internal audit, essentially, is what it comes down to. And I wanted them to perform, and I still would like a performance of a detailed forensic audit. And as we identified, I mean, we talk about Antrim County. This isn't just a Wayne County issue. We don't know how many other counties this may have impacted that flew under the radar. Didn't have a Bill Bailey highlighting what was going on. I believe you need a full forensic audit. The key question is they haven't demonstrated chain of custody on any of the key election data. So, yeah, I'm concerned. You can't just go off and fix it with a recount of the ballot. That's downstream. If you've already got this whole chain of custody broken at the qualified voter file level and at the poll book level, what good's a recount going to do?
Well, I think that it's pretty telling that the Trump campaign did not request a recount in Michigan. It seems pretty clear to me that they know that a recount would mess up their current strategy, which is just to throw up a bunch of smoke and mirrors. And it's particularly telling also that you here, sir, in committee, you have continued to repeat information about Antrim County, and then when you were corrected with the testimony that this committee heard, you just go back and repeat the same old misconstrued statements about what happened in Antrim County. So forgive me if it's difficult after reading these lawsuits and listening to your testimony to understand even what you're talking about. We need some evidence. We need some proof. All we've got here are conjecture and musings by former Senator Colbeck.
All right. Well, I'll tell you, upstream, we talk about the recount issue in particular. You want to talk about some of the upstream concerns that have never been refuted. We got 8.1 million registered voters here in the state of Michigan. The only problem with that is demographic analysis shows that more than 300,000 and as high as 600,000 of those folks should not be on the voter rolls. So you want to go off and do a recount, you've already got a broken link right up at the top that says there's over 300,000 people that should not even be eligible to vote in the state of Michigan. You've got some serious problems when you even, the Antrim County and everything downstream of it, frankly, is interesting side notes once you realize that somebody's breached the top link of the chain of custody. So how can you be confident in anything downstream?
Senator Santana.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you allowing me to sit at your table today, committee members. And as the only Detroiter up here today, I have a couple questions for you, Senator Colbeck.
Sure.
On Thursday, October 29th, the city clerk hosted a challengers conference where Chris Thomas and Daniel Baxter gave a detailed overview of the process.
Mm-hmm.
From what I understand, they provided a thorough explanation of all three steps of the orientation process by ballot recording information in the poll book, tabulating ballots through the ICC high-speed tabulators, and the adjudication process where the overvoted blank ballots and the write-in ballots were reviewed by teams composed of one Republican as well as one Democrat. Did anyone attend the conference?
To the best of my knowledge, we've been asking for when that would actually occur, and there's a gentleman here, he might be here, Phil O'Halloran. Phil, are you here? Phil can talk to that because we we're specifically making repeated requests for information related to events like that. And I'll let Phil fill in the blanks associated with that, but I was very concerned. I can tell you, if I was notified about that meeting, I would have been there.
Well, it seems like, these things would have been addressed at that meeting, and that
Yeah,
meeting was
I
open
agree.
to everyone. So, it seems that, maybe your committee should have had some more communication with the city, but the city also provided that information as well.
Yeah, like I said, we'll let Phil testify, but believe me, there were attempts to do that, and I can tell you, COVID was used as an excuse to push off meetings, to push off attendance at different things. There's a whole sequence of emails that I was working with folks to try to identify specifically when things like that would happen. We're concerned about the use of a the Reliant scanning system to verify ballot signatures, for example. The Reliant system when you want to go off, and the clerk's office will validate that the voter signature on the ballot envelope matches the one that we have in the qualified voter file. And if it doesn't, then they're not a qualified voter, right? So you can't go off and count their ballot. We wanted to know what was going on with that Reliant system. How was it being calibrated? Because if you calibrate that at a very permissive level, if you will, you're not going to filter out any bad signatures. And we also know that Reliant voting system is based on 8-point signature technology that was over 2 decades old. So it's not the latest and greatest you'll see with banking systems that are used today. So believe me, we're trying to get access to that type of information for quite a while before the election.
Mayor Chair. I'm glad you brought that up, because I actually ran into a constituent at Marshall's as I was shopping, and her mother had an issue with the signature, and so her ballot, she got that information back to her home. So because the signatures did not match up.
Yeah.
And the clerk's office did resubmit to her that one obviously was spoiled, but they did submit to her a new ballot for her to be able to fill out. So the integrity that the clerk is providing, in my opinion, is very concise, and it is a integral system. So they did look at that signature to see that it was not matching up with her mother's signature. So I don't think that your argument is valid. And if you don't have factual information to prove that, then it seems like this is speculative in nature.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator Santana. Senator Colbeck, I really appreciate all the time you put into the presentation and for, your efforts at voter integrity and stuff. And so appreciate you being here today and submitting this to me, as well as some other information that I'll be making available to the group on process flow for Election Day. Any other members have a question? No. Yes?
Sorry, it's not a question, just a point of clarification. The interim county clerk said that they pulled their numbers off the tapes. They didn't do an actual physical recount of the ballots.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that correction.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you very much, committee members. Appreciate it.
Okay. So now to those who have come here to testify, I have received your cards. If you are not familiar with the process and you want to testify, please find a yellow card such as these and fill that out and turn that into one of the staff who's here today. I will be running a timer, and you'll hear an alarm go off when your 3 minutes are up. I will also give you a 1 minute or a 30-second warning. And so I just want to get through as many folks as we can. And if you don't have the time today, as I've mentioned before, we welcome your conclusions and such in writing. It's great if you can submit the whole testimony in writing. If you don't have firsthand knowledge, if you weren't there, we still will accept written testimony, but I ask that you not take the time away from those who do have firsthand knowledge at the microphone today, and I'll rule you out of order and ask that you vacate the space for someone else if that turns out to be the case. Vice Chair Lucido? Right, and I, as the chair, have the time to stay here, but other members of the committee will be in and out at times for whether it's personal reasons or other committee obligations they have as well. So with that, first up, I have Phil O'Halloran. And then on deck, we have Patty McMurray, and after that, R. Weber. So if you just heard your name called, please go ahead and prepare to come up after Mr. O'Halloran. Sir, your 3 minutes begins. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Senator McBroom. My name is Phil O'Halloran, and I'm a registered voter in Michigan, where I've lived since 1986. My comments are based on sworn affidavits of myself and others in a group I organized, and I'm speaking under oath. I've been a GOP challenger on many occasions dating back to the mid-1990s. I was at the TCF Center on the general election 2018 and also the August 2020 primary. I saw that ballot security was a serious problem, and chain of custody of the ballots arriving at the TCF Center was virtually non-existent. So in October, I organized a group of volunteers to observe ballot movements from the Department of Elections on West Grand Boulevard to the TCF Center. The following are some of the things our group discovered. While ballots are generally transported by 2 people, on more than one occasion there was just a single transporter. At the departure point, which was the Department of Elections, the loading of the vehicles was rarely, if ever, supervised by election officials. We saw no transfer paperwork, no people with clipboards logging the departure and arrival times, no logging of the type or number of ballots on departure, or any logging of the type or number of ballots on arrival at the TCF Center. In the Challenger Conference the week before, which someone had earlier mentioned, Director of Elections George Jesus admitted that they do not transport ballots with a chain of custody. Also, I should point out that Challenger Conference was, the only reason I knew about it was I had met with George Jesus before and he invited me. Other people, other activists for the GOP did not know anything about it that I knew of. One man was even photographed carrying 100 blank ballots under his arm in the alley behind the Department of Elections. The ballots were in no container whatsoever, which is required by law. The man said he had been doing this all week long. The ballot transporters are mostly temporary employees hired for the election, and when I asked election officials if the transporters underwent background checks, we were told at the conference that the workers underwent a human resources process, but they would not confirm that any background checks occurred. And these are transporters who often carry thousands of ballots. The transporters frequently arrived at the TCF in an assortment of cars and vans, many with out-of-state plates, and they did not appear to be rentals. On the afternoon of November 4th, I observed a Penske truck that was parked outside the Department of Elections that appeared to be guarded by 2 men in a city of Detroit pickup parked behind it. They told me that the truck was empty, but when we returned about 4 hours later after dark around 9:30, the 2 men were still behind the Penske truck. Later at around 10 p.m., after being barred entry to the TCF Center, I returned and saw the truck leaving the DOE and followed an investigation, or if one took place. I conclude that the lack of a chain of custody and the transport of thousands of absent voter ballots over several days is a serious threat to election integrity, and it makes it impossible to guarantee the results of the election.
Thank you very much, sir. Any questions? No, thank you. Oh, yes, Vice Chair Lucido?
Yeah.
The only question I have is, can we get the full copy of your testimony in
And-
written form? Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Vice Chair Lucido.
did we get, Mr. O'Halloran, the name, address, and phone number of that transporter who you indicated he's been there doing this all week long? Do you have that name, address, and phone number so we can contact him?
It was more than one, it was many people.
The one
have
that
all
you,
that information.
the
yes.
one that's in your testimony, you said the one that you stopped, the name of the individual is what I'm looking for.
The-
Is it incorporated in your testimony that you've written out for us?
Not right here. We have that available, though. Yes.
Sorry.
So I can't contact him, is that what you're saying?
You can't, well, you're talking about the person who was carrying the ballots or the person who saw them?
The man that you said all week long he's been carrying ballots like that.
Yeah, the name at the time was given to the lawyer that we contacted. As soon as this occurred, we contacted a lawyer.
What lawyer was that? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, for digging deep,
Please.
but these are individuals that are testifying under affidavit that I need to know the name of the lawyer.
Yeah, I believe that it was Mr. Sean Flynn.
John Flynn?
But, yeah, I believe we gave the name of the gentleman who saw the man in the street did have a name. I don't know if they wrote it down. They did mention the name, so I don't remember the name offhand.
Mr. Chairman, so that when what's called compounded testimony goes on, I need to know, is there individuals that are signed up, that are transporters, that have to give their name, address, phone number, city, so that we know who these individuals are that are handling the ballots? That be fair?
Correct.
When the committee has the opportunity to speak to the elections officials of Wayne County and the city of Detroit, we should ask that question, but we'll try to get an answer even before then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. O'Halloran.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, next, Patty McMurray. On deck is R. Weber, and followed by that is Jeff Stearns. Patty here? Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee, Patty. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I wanted to start by showing you, this is a book. I actually printed these affidavits last night. These are affidavits from Republican poll watchers or poll challengers that witnessed incredible events at the TCF Center. Mostly, they're all from the TCF Center. So I want to thank you for having me. I've been a poll challenger for 9 years. So I wasn't new to poll challenging when I worked at the TCF Center. I originally applied to be a worker as an election inspector for the Wayne County elections. And the night before I was supposed to work there, I was told, I received an email saying basically that I was an alternate, that I would end up in an overflow room. So I opted to be a poll challenger. When I got there, I began working on the duplicate ballot process, where one poll worker would hold the ballot that they needed to duplicate, the other would have a blank ballot, and they would duplicate it. And then there was a witness that would stand behind them. And I knew the procedure at every table because, like I said, I had been trained to be an election worker, so I knew what was going on. We were never told that the person that was inspecting the ballot, their job was to stand in front of the Republican poll challenger, but consistently, that's what we saw. Whenever we would try to watch the process, the person that was inspecting the ballot would stand in front of us, and if we tried to move to the side, one of the agitators that were at the TCF Center, and there were lots of agitators that were there working on behalf, in my opinion, of the Democrat Party. They would challenge us and tell us to stand back, that we were too close, that we were going to kill people with COVID. So that's what we encountered, and we were not allowed to get up close to the ballots. It just was prohibited, wasn't allowed. At one point, when the military ballots came in, we were told to take a break, that it was a good time to take a break. I'd been there for 6 hours. I worked for a total of 13 hours that day, and the only time I sat down because Republican poll workers had to go upstairs to another room to get lunch or to sit on a chair. Democrats and the agitators all had a corner where food was brought into them. They were served food. They didn't have to leave. When it was time to go to lunch, we had to leave because we didn't have food provided. We had to go to another room. When we got back, the doors were locked. I was able to get back into the room, but I witnessed pizza boxes being placed over the windows so that the poll challengers couldn't see in. And those were being placed over the windows by election workers and by the agitators that were down there. Jocelyn Benson was on the radio with Frank Beckman, where she talked about the poll challengers outside that were locked out, and she told him that the police had to cover the windows. There were no police that were even anywhere near where the windows were being covered because the windows were being broken by the poll challengers. I don't know why she felt it necessary to completely make up a story about what happened. She wasn't there. She didn't see it.
Dumb phone, sorry.
I real briefly just wanted to mention about the military ballots. When it was time to count the military ballots.
You need to wrap up.
Pardon?
I'll give you 15 more seconds
Okay.
to wrap up. Please.
Not one of the military ballots was a registered voter. And the ballots looked like they were all exactly the same Xerox copies of the ballot. They were all for Biden across the board. There wasn't a single Trump vote. And none of the voters were registered. They had to manually enter the names and addresses and a birth date of 1/1/2020, which would override the system and allow them to enter non-registered voters, of which I saw several that day. Throughout the day, that's how they would override voters that were neither in the electronic poll book or the supplemental updated poll book.
Thank you. Any members have a question?
Were those being cast then as provisional ballots, or were they actually
No.
being tabulated?
No, and when we would try to challenge them, they would tell us no.
Thank you very much. I'll try and put this on airplane mode so I have less time. Next, we have R. Weber, followed by Jeff Stearns, and then I believe it's Colin Sitch or Glitch, I'm not sure, somebody from Rochester Hills, from the Integrity Fund, so that's the third one up. Right now, it's R. Weber. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Rhonda Weber, and I'm going to provide some sworn testimony. I was asked to provide surveillance at the Department of Elections on West Grand Boulevard, the day of election day. And approximately 4:45, I noticed a man working in front of the elections area with an open bin, accepting ballots as people would drop them off. Then I noticed a black SUV parked on West Grand Boulevard, and a woman with blonde hair was taking a Tupperware and dropping these off into the man's unsecured area or kind of box. And she did this 3 times. And so what I did was I took a picture of that, and I have photos of that, so if you'd like to see them. And the photos are kind of, I mean, they're very busy, West Grand Boulevard, but I have circled what you should be looking at. Then, on the day after elections, I was providing observation in the back of Department of Elections, where there's a big garage door, and I was then kind of relieved of my post by an off-duty police officer. And all of a sudden, he contacted me and said, "We have a gentleman who has ballots in his hand, placed them in the back of the car, and he's driving off." And I was right at the alley, right on 2nd at West Grand Boulevard. So I followed him. I have photos of that also. And he went to the post office, which is a few blocks east of West Grand Boulevard. I then got out of my car and took some photos of him, putting in white envelopes that were in post office trays into the back of the car. The car that was doing this, I have a license plate. It was a municipal vehicle, and I have the license plate. And again, these photos. He then saw that I was taking his photo. So when he pulled out, he boxed me in, and it became quite aggressive, and I was scared. Him doing that prevented me from following him, but he went down in the direction to Woodward and then made a left, so he would have been going in the direction of TCF. I then spoke to my colleague, who was an off-duty police officer, and he was back at Department of Elections at 2 o'clock that day. And this is, again, the day after elections, and I have photos of this. And that's my testimony.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Members of the audience, I would appreciate if you would withhold applause, because it simply takes more time away from other people being able to testify. Senator
Make
Tice.
sure we get copies, so for anybody that's speaking, for anybody who has that kind of evidence, please make sure that we get access to those and that you get them
Yeah, if you would please.
to
bring
the
the
chair,
picture.
and then he'll make sure they come to us. Thank you.
No, that's, ma'am, thank you. We have it here. We'll attach it. Thank you very much. Next, we have Jack Stearns. Then we'll be followed by, I now can read this, it's Glenn. I'm sorry for not reading the handwriting correctly the first time. Glenn Sitch. And then after that will be Patty Camadre or Camact. I'm from Family America, so my apologies if I don't get the names pronounced correctly. Jeffrey, welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. You have 3 minutes.
All right. Thank you to the senators who are here. My name is Jeff, or Jack Stearns. I go by Jack as a nickname. I'm a resident of Orion Township, and I'm a registered independent. First, I want to begin by thanking the Oversight Committee today for allowing me the opportunity to present my concerns regarding what happened here in Michigan and in Oakland and in Wayne County on November 3rd and 4th of the 2020 election. I realize that the process of oversight can be trying and tedious, but it is nonetheless an important part of transparency, which I think we can all agree is something that is necessary and critical when it comes to having a free and fair election. The people here today are in the spirit of seeking closure and answers for what many believe was a potential miscarriage of justice in the form of voting irregularities, rule breaking, manipulation, or outright fraud. And these are issues which must be addressed. We hope that today the committee will also approach in good faith the concerns raised and take every effort to address and answer questions, as well as correct problems and mistakes which occurred during the election where they exist. What I'm offering today is my impassioned plea, my emotional cadence, which will hopefully spur the committee to act in the interests of justice and integrity. The allegations of what transpired at TCF are in no short supply, and you have no doubt heard them and will continue to hear them. I can say that for my part, what I heard and witnessed myself, admittedly through secondhand sources, was appalling and bears enough credence to warrant a full and complete audit. The allegations are serious, and anyone in this committee who values the integrity of our electoral process should find them highly troubling. They should not be dismissed or ignored. I offer this plea not because I am disappointed in the results, but because the response by our governor's office, by the Secretary of State, and by administrators of Wayne County to legitimate questions and concerns has been wholly and astonishingly unsatisfactory. There is a vital component of our representative democracy, of our republic, that allows for any government action, and that is consent of the governed. And this is achieved foremost through our duly and properly elected representatives, with whom we as citizens trust to make decisions, laws, restrictions, and punishments for the general populace on the assumption, the belief as it were, that they hold their positions legitimately and through legitimate election. If a portion of the population believes that their representatives from the lowest office to the highest were not elected fairly, properly, or legitimately, then it throws the whole system through which we agree to be governed, in effect, this experiment of a republic, of a liberal democracy, into question. We have seen this happen in many places throughout the world, and we like to think that it can't happen here or it doesn't happen here. But when there are signs, when people witness irregularities, be they subtle or blatant, or when there are occurrences which make no logical sense, then it should be concerning to everyone, not just the side that lost. Benjamin Franklin famously called our proposed system of governments in our nation's infancy, quote, a republic, if you can keep it. This relies on the consent of the governed, so that we are not merely subjects under the whims of tyranny. Do not simply tell us that everything went smoothly, that there's nothing to see here. Do not tell us to shut up and crawl back into our holes. These are actions of people who are not in control of a transparent election, and these are not the actions of a government who values the consent of which it governs.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Members, any
time.
questions? Thank you.
I submitted this in email to the committee so you can read it in full.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate your time.
Next, we have Glenn Sitch, or Sita, followed by Patty, and then Lori Levi, or Levy. Is Glenn here? Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. Sir, I'm really sorry about my mistakes in pronouncing your name.
It's SciTech.
SciTech?
Yes.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I worked over 40 hours over the course of 3 days down at Wayne County AV Board review. Excuse me, I'm out of breath. I just ran down the hallway to know I was next. Anyways, some of the things I want to point out is some improprieties and some obvious deficiencies. First of all, on the day of voting, became aware that we didn't have enough GOP people available for doing simple things like duplication of ballots. Excuse me again. The point I want to make is that I approached Daniel Baxter, who was the chairman for this AV center, and asked him directly, about the number of GOP people that were there waiting for a duplication of a ballot, and none showed up. So at that point, I asked him how many GOP workers there were. He says, "Oh, we have about 10 or 12." He says, "Well, are they on the tabulators?" He says, "Oh, no, we don't need them over there." I says, "They're on the adjudication tables." And 10 to 12 people didn't even man all the stations that were there, which, again, indicated to me that there was not an adequate number of Republicans opposing to validate the proper dual party evaluation of all these adjudicator tables, the regular ballot counting stations. So let me move on to, excuse me. Yeah. The other thing I noticed that at the end of the day on around 6:30, there were 5,000 ballots that needed to be duplicated, sitting on a table. If you perceive the workforce, most of the tables had retired. They were on break, and they were none of them were doing anything. And a few of or maybe a quarter of the tables are finishing up precinct countings. When I went upstairs to take a break, right around 7 o'clock, they were dismissing the extra workers that they had for their staff, telling them they were no longer needed. And I came back down, and still none of those ballots had been challenged or were being duplicated. What it indicated to me was a misuse of their workforce. They had 5,000 ballots that needed to be duplicated, but they weren't bothering to process any of them while they had the people available. So, and then I ended up being there, excuse me, on Wednesday to follow up. And I actually was watching a tabulator machine. And it's important to know that I ended up in assault and battery with a worker there.
I'm very sorry about why this alarm is so hard to shut off. But
Right.
that's the conclusion of your 3
Well-
minutes. Did you submit your testimony in writing?
I did on the assault and battery charge.
Which you will make sure to take note of that and attach it to your testimony. Thank you.
I'll see if I have a copy.
Any questions, members? Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Next, we have Patty Kamakte from Family America, followed by Lori Levy, followed by Chris Shornack. Is Patty here? That's fine. I'll wait. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee, Patty.
Hi,
I
thank you.
apologize again for mispronouncing your name. You have 3 minutes.
Excuse me.
Take your time.
Well,
I'll reset it.
not sure exactly how I was selected to come before the committee because I was not at TCF that morning.
Oh, well, if you're not, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm
My
not an actual
mistake.
witness.
I just read the
I have
cards.
lots of opinion or things to say, but I wasn't an eyewitness.
Okay.
So I'd give my time to someone who was there.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
That brings us then to Lori Levy, or Levi. Levi? She'll be followed by Chris Shornack, and after that is Kelly Esper.
Good afternoon to the committee. My name is Lori Levi from Canton, Michigan. I am a registered voter, and I was at the TCF Center as a poll challenger. As you're going to hear multiple duplicate testimonies here. What I'm going to focus on is the thing that was most disturbing to me. I was under the impression that as a poll challenger, our primary responsibility is to make sure before a vote is cast that that ballot is either in the registered poll book, the computer book, or in the paper poll book, of which anytime as a challenger, I tried to look at the ballot and then try to verify it, I would get 2 or 3 of the poll workers literally screaming at me to get back 6 feet. However, we did not know that that had been overturned the night before, which would have been helpful. But at no time were we able actually to physically see the ballot and then see it in the poll electronic book. The person opening the ballot would probably be sitting where Senator Theis is, and the electronic screen that we were supposed to be watching is basically to where the committee clerk is. Now, I don't know if you guys got binocular vision, but I don't. So I cannot look at a ballot over here, run down to this screen and be able to see it and verify that it is the same. I did address that with them multiple times, and they told me, sorry, I should have planned better. Plan better as to how? Needing binoculars? I mean, we as a poll challenger are supposed to verify the name, address on the ballot to the electronic poll book. And if it is not there, then it is supposed to be in a paper poll book, of which there was a significantly large poll worker. Anytime that I said that is not in the book, when she would scan it, it would not come up on the screen, then she would basically hover over this paper book, sometimes checking something, and other times we could see that they did not check it. And then they proceeded to manually enter these into the electronic poll book, where then they would come up on the screen. Many of these papers were not absentee ballot, the yellow envelope, the standard ballot. Some of them were on printed paper. Some of them were in white envelopes. Some of them had multiple papers attached to them. So then they would manually enter them into the electronic book. And I wrote down as many as I could see as quickly as they were entering them, of which you have before you. Now this, in disclosure, due to my travel schedule, I did not see I was supposed to submit this in writing. So what you have before you is the same testimony that I submitted to Robert Steele.
You can submit at a later time. I mean, if you don't have it now, you can write it
But
up.
basically, it is the same thing that I submitted, and I printed you a copy. So yesterday, my husband and I attempted to verify these addresses. Out of the 8 or 9 addresses here, we were only able to verify that there was one voter that actually lived at this address. And I can present to you one voter. I don't want to say their name, but you have it. This is their address that they show on their voter registration card. This is a church, of which it is illegal to register to vote anywhere but at your home address. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you. And I'll provide that to you.
Was there a question from a member?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, it was. Thank you very much. That's her written testimony from before, but she might have sent us an amendment, she said, so. Okay, next we have Chris Shornack, followed by Kelly Esper. And after that, Christina Karamu. Thank you. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman McBroom. Dear Chairman, I was a poll challenger with the Nonpartisan Election Integrity Fund, both on Tuesday, November 3rd and Wednesday, November 4th. On Tuesday, I was a poll challenger for the city of Royal Oak, where only 10 ballots out of the 25,000 ballots were spoiled and not able to be matched to the QVF, qualified voter file. Royal Oak ran their absentee ballot counting board perfectly. The chain of custody was broken at the absentee counting board in Detroit. How? I watched as hundreds and thousands of ballots came in that poll workers were not able to verify in the QVF nor the paper logbook. Yet, that ballot was removed from the secrecy sleeve, bunched together with other verified ballots, counted and ran through the high-speed tabulators. I have a sworn affidavit of this and have attached it to my public statement. I was able to challenge only 2 of these ballots and get them entered into the electronic record. I attempted to challenge more, but the poll workers simply refused, verbally attacked me, and had others do the same. Since then, I volunteered with Guard the Vote. over the last 3 weeks, Guard the Vote had over 1,000 volunteers painstakingly go through 30,000 of the 172,000 absentee votes in the city of Detroit and found the following results, which I've brought with me here. 229 of these 30,000 we went through are deceased. We have proof of this. Senator Lucido, you were asking for proof. 2,660 of them, invalid addresses described by vacant lots and burnt down houses. I have a genuine question. Can someone in this room tell me how a deceased person can vote? Nonetheless, at the very lowest levels, if these percentages carry through, this means that of the 172,000 AV votes in the city of Detroit, 1,300 of them could be deceased. We're investigating it. Another 15,000 could have fraudulent addresses described as living on vacant lots or burnt down houses. What I can say for sure, and swear to you here today, I can say that overall 8.9% of the 30,000 absentee ballots that we've gone through and investigated just in the city of Detroit were unqualified fraudulent ballots that should have been spoiled. And again, I have this printed out on the list. It's available for all of you. Why should this alarm you? Because this confirms that the city of Detroit poll workers were not properly performing a crucial step of verifying ballots in the qualified voter file, corrupting the whole chain of custody. And despite that, as I've sworn in my affidavit, and so has many others, those ballots were in fact counted and ran through the high-speed tabulators. We can prove there is fraud, which should disturb all of us. Isn't that the officials who are supposed to care and do something about this? They don't want to even listen to the fraud that we know exists. I would plead to everybody's sense of truth and justice to fair and honest elections. Are you listening? Will you even remember my name in 30 seconds? You know, say my name, Chris Shornack. Say my name, Chris Shornack. I do thank you for your time, and I hope for the love of God, truth, and fair elections that you will take the proper action and void the election in Wayne County.
Thank you. Senator Lucido has a question, please.
Thank you, Chris Shornack.
Thank you, Senator.
He doesn't even have it written in front of him.
And you know what's interesting? I grew up with a Shornack family in St. Clair Shores, so I appreciate you coming out. Yeah, you intrigued me. These 30,000 dead people that voted.
Well, not 30,000 dead people. This is 174,000 absentee ballots were counted in Detroit, and we were starting to go through them. We only got through 30,000 of them. Of that 30,000, 229 of them are deceased.
Okay. So now, what have you done to further your investigation? I know you started it. Have you turned any of this data over to the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is the United States criminal justice system, or to our Attorney General? These are the top law enforcement officials of this state. And I guess what I'm asking is,
why haven't I done anything with it?
well, you brought it to the legislature. We are lawmakers. We're policy people. Some of us are even wonks, like, I guess his name is Senator Patrick Kolbeck, which we all respect. At the end of the day, I would love to see some of these things turned over with a CC to the Oversight Committee, because what we've learned is that I know the chairman and the other members of this committee are working real hard to start to look at policy and fashion legislation that will ban, bar, and vitiate all of these concerns. It's very tough to do, but at the end of the day, this needs to go to the Attorney General's office. If there is people that have died and are voting in an election, that needs to be brought to her attention, as well as the United States Department of Justice, that ensures voting as well as the respect of our Constitution.
Yeah, I can assure you that's going to be done. I stand here representing over 1,000 volunteers, and they got my word. And you know, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm volunteering like everybody else behind me. And this is new to me. I'm a hack, but I do know that we're going to follow this up, and we're going to get it to those exact same people. And
We
we'll be
appreciate that, and I got to tell you, the concerns that everybody sitting in here, outside, in the other overflow rooms have are genuine, legitimate, but more importantly, they need to be brought to our attention as policymakers, not court of law. This is not a judge sitting here. He's a committee chairman, respected in his communities as we are all in ours. We're elected officials, but we don't wear robes and we don't make decisions on what is going on here. but we will listen to it for policy purposes to ensure the sanctity and security of the voting system. Thank you very much, Mr. Chris Shornack.
Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Shornack, the file folder that you have there, are we going to receive copies of
Yeah,
that for the
I
record?
printed out
or-
one copy, and I
Okay.
tell you what, you can have my copy too. So you'll have 2 copies of that. And I did cut my testimony a little short. It's slightly longer.
I appreciate
Wanted
that.
to keep it under 3 minutes and respect everybody's time. But yeah, let me give you this.
If you don't have the opportunity to give me the doubles now, I mean, later is fine. I just,
Okay.
whatever's convenient for
Let's
you.
do that so we can speed this along.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Not seeing any others. Thank you, Mr. Shornack. Appreciate your time. Next, we have Kelly Esper, followed by Christina Caramo, and then will be Monica Palmer. Ms. Esper, welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. You have 3
Senator
minutes.
Hello, everybody. I'm here today as a registered Michigan voter, a mother, an educator, and a precinct delegate. I volunteered my time with the Election Integrity Fund to be a nonpartisan poll challenger. I worked at the TCF Center from 6:30 in the morning until approximately 9 o'clock at night. Throughout my training, I was told that the poll workers should not even have pens or pencils at the table. Shortly into the whole process, 150 tables simultaneously started duplicating ballots. And by the admission of several of the people, who are like the supervisors in Detroit, they had 10 to 12 Republican poll workers. So when you think about this, ballots were being duplicated en masse by 3 Democrat poll workers at a time. Where was the oversight in that? I also witnessed a August 4th primary ballot come in, to which they decided they would go ahead and duplicate it to a general election ballot. I also witnessed several of the poll workers yelling, cussing, all kinds of nasty things at a lot of the poll challengers, including myself. And I'm trying to think what else I saw. I'm trying to cut it short. I did submit my whole testimony. But other than that, I mean, it was just rampant, going on all night. I tried to raise challenges and was denied several times. So I know that there were things going on that were not lawful and should not have been going on. It does not give us a free and fair election, and that's why I'm here to tell you.
Thank you, Ms. Esper. Could you tell me what happens when you, as a poll challenger, issue a challenge to a ballot and they say, I'm not going to accept that? I mean, is there a justification given?
So it's in my testimony, but I will tell you that the first time I tried to do a challenge, the supervisor of that table handed me a book of rules and told me no, and the process would continue.
And subsequent times, I mean, was there any direction given
I
as to
was
what
not-
was invalidated about your challenge?
No,
Were you able to
Just
challenge
denied.
any ballot successfully?
just denied.
Did you see any of the other challengers successfully challenge a ballot?
I did not.
Okay. Any other members have a question? Okay, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
We'll go at ease at the call of the chair. Committee will come back to order. Mr. Shornack, since you are still right here in the very front, and one of my colleagues, I neglected to see she had a question, would you please come back up? Senator Santana does have a question for you. My apologies, Senator, for missing your signal that you had a question.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Yarnack, one of the things that I really don't understand about the 2020 presidential election is that it's not that much different than 2016 for the city of Detroit. When you look at, everyone in America knows that Detroit has been voting democratically since the 1930s. And, you know, in the 2016 election with Clinton and Kane, the ticket had a solid, we had 234,800 votes. In the Trump and Pence election, they received 7,600 of those votes out of Detroit. Similarly, in 2020, the Biden-Harris election, around the same amount of votes came out of Detroit, 240,000. And Trump and Pence received 13,000 of those votes from almost about 5,000 more than he received in 2015. So with the numbers being so close in the city of Detroit around the voters, how can you validate a fraud situation when not only this election, but also the 2016 presidential election shows similar numbers coming out of the city of Detroit?
Was there a question?
How can you
Sorry.
Yes, there was a question, Mr. Yarnick. How can you validate fraud coming out of the city of Detroit when the numbers from the 2016 election are not that much different from the numbers from the 2020 election? You had 234,000 votes, 800 votes coming out of Detroit in 2016, with Trump receiving 7,600 of those votes, and 5,000 more in 2020 for Trump in this 2020 election. So where's the fraud?
Yeah, super. I can't speak to the numbers of 2016 or now or total votes, but your question is, how can we verify fraud and validate fraud? Over 229 deceased people voting, that's fraud. That's not my definition of fraud. That's just the generally accepted definition of fraud. And 2,660 vacant addresses of burnt down lots, and these people voted, the dead people voted, that's fraud. That's how I validate the fraud and my personal experience on November 4th, being there, watching ballots come in that aren't in the qualified voter file. They're not on the written log, and yet they're still counting those. And you'll hear from other people say, hey, all we want to do, it's so easy to challenge a ballot. You just go like this. You type in the computer that one of the poll watchers challenged it. It takes 3 seconds. It doesn't slow the process down, and they pretty much refuse to do that. I struggled to get to, and I said to our attorney, Tim Griffin, I said, Tim, they won't let us challenge anything. He goes, Chris, you got to get at least something in the poll book that you challenged it. And I said, I'll push it until I get arrested. Well, lo and behold, I didn't get arrested. They didn't put cuffs on me, but I was pulled out of there for about 20 minutes by 3 police officers. It was rough. It was a really hostile environment, and I know you guys aren't judges or legislators. I just want to be transparent in answering your question. What we all witnessed there on Election Day and the day after matches the research of the 30,000 records we just went through very clearly.
And did you also attend the training on how things were going to operate at the TFC Center?
Yep. I didn't bring my training with me, but yeah, I had hours of training, almost like a day and a half, because I helped train other people too.
Thank you, Senator Santana. Thank you, sir, for coming back. Members of the audience, please remember. Senator Tice.
Thank you. I just want to apologize. I have another committee that I'm supposed to be chairing. I'm going to head off and do that. It shouldn't take very long, and then I will be back. But I wanted to apologize. I'll make sure I watch whatever I miss on the recorded session. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tice. Next, we have Christina Caramo, followed by Monica Palmer, followed by Karen Cordes. Ms. Caramo? I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly.
It's Caramo.
Caramo, thank
It's
you.
quite all right.
Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. You have 3 minutes.
All right, thank you for having me. So I was a poll challenger at the TCF Center on Monday, November 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. On November 4th, early in the morning, I was standing at the adjudication table, and a ballot came across the screen. The ballot had a straight party ticket vote for both the Democrat and the Republican. It was a filled-in circle, which is an intentional mark. It's not a dash, it's not a dot. When the ballot came across the screen, there was no other marks. None of the judges and none of the other ballot proposals had been voted on. The poll worker then said, I think I'm going to give it to the Democrats. That's absolutely absurd. That is illegal. The vote should have been tossed out. At that moment, I said, absolutely not. I'm going to challenge this. So I go get her supervisor. And then her supervisor defers to her and says, well, what do you think? And I'm like, well, what do you think? It doesn't matter what you think. It's the law. Our feelings, our emotions, our thoughts are totally irrelevant. You follow the law. And that ballot is to be tossed out. But she wanted to give it to the Democrats. So then I go get the gentleman who was overseeing the entire absentee ballot counting process while Daniel Baxter was gone. So this gentleman's name I do not know. I go get him. He's overseeing the entire process while Daniel Baxter is gone. I ask him. He says to the girl, what do you think? It was disgusting. I was enraged. And I simply asked a question. I said, well, why not give it to the Republicans instead of the Democrats? The gentleman began screaming at me, began yelling at me, began telling me that I had no right to talk to her, and he told her to push the ballot through. And prior to that, that same poll worker, a ballot came across the adjudication screen where this voter had voted for Joe Biden and the Green Party presidential candidate, and she gave the vote to Joe Biden. I also saw the ballots show up in the middle of the night. Also, I inquired about the tabulation numbers from the tabulation machine between shift changes. I was denied that information. We saw a lot of irregular things. This is not an anomaly. Just because all of us have different accounts of what we saw, that doesn't make them invalid. And to expect Secretary Benson to actually do something about it is foolhardy. To accept Dan and Essel to do anything about it would be foolhardy. So we're appealing to you guys to do something about it. Because if our elections aren't fair, then we have no republic left. It's a banana republic. We have nothing. And we don't trust the election process. Why do you think a lot of people don't vote? Because they feel it's a big fraud. So our claims are being dismissed. I mean, Secretary Benson dismissed us before she did any investigation. So clearly she can't be trusted to do her job. It's not our job to conduct an investigation. There are paid officials who are to do that. And we're imploring you guys to please step up and listen to us and investigate our claims. Check us out. Don't just take our word. Investigate what we had to say, because we have nothing left. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any members have a question? Vice Chair Lucido, please.
Thank you. Extremely insightful. All these accounts that you've indicated, and it's been pretty clear. I mean, it doesn't seem like you're on the edge. You're sitting right here in front of us. Has any of these accounts gone to the attorneys that are representing the candidate or candidates?
I did submit an affidavit. They are pursuing lawsuits, but we also need our Attorney General to investigate it, because ultimately it's her job to enforce the law.
I agree.
And if she doesn't do her job, we can't just accept that as, oh, I'm just not going to do it. You guys are lying.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Senator Lucido. I don't have any other questions. Thank you so much. Did you submit written testimony?
Okay. No, I did not. No, I can, though.
Please do.
All
Thank
righty.
you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Monica Palmer, followed by Karen Cortis, and then after that will be Brian Panabaker. Ms. Palmer? Yes?
Yes.
Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman McBroom. Members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Monica Palmer. I am the chair of the Wayne County Board of Canvassers. After the primary election, we had 76% of the Detroit absentee precincts unrecountable because they were unbalanced and unexplained. At that time, the Board of Canvassers issued a bipartisan resolution asking for an investigation of the election, and we asked the Secretary of State to assist in conducting the November election, understanding that there would be an increase in the absentee ballots that were cast. When we went through the primary election, I was asked as a canvasser, what happened? How did we end up with so many precincts out of balance? Was it fraud? Was it human error? And at that point, I didn't know because I had never witnessed the process in person. In the general election at 9 p.m. election evening, I went down to TCF Center to observe. I was credentialed as a Republican challenger, but I did not challenge. I was there just to hopefully see some improvements while I was there. One item that I would like to point out to you, the ballot containers that the ballots are stored in, those are supposed to be certified by the Board of Canvassers. They have expiration dates on them, labels. As I was walking through the TCF Center, I located 5 ballot containers that had red labels on them that said "do not use." Those were rejected by the Board of Canvassers because they were not secure. The last order that the City of Detroit placed for their ballot containers, the welds were not properly sealed on the back, and you can actually slip paper in and out of the back of those ballot boxes. Those absentee counting boards that used the red label uncertified ballot containers, those will not be recountable.
1 minute.
1 minute. The other thing that I would like to note, I did see an improvement with shift change for election inspectors. I think that was helpful instead of having people work the entire time and be very tired. As you're looking at policy moving forward, I would like to point out that Tuesday evening from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. the next morning, the majority of the election inspectors who are working at the tables processing the ballots were idle for at least, I would say they were working about 2 hours of their entire shift. If you're looking at improving the process moving forward, the adjudication process is what is the bottleneck, and it's taking the most time. I would look at more funding and more equipment for the adjudication process as a solution for policy changes. I do have additional information regarding poll books and how that impacts the canvas and balancing out of the precincts, but I don't think we have time for that this afternoon. If you have additional questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yep, Ms. Palmer, thank you for that, and I would like to be able to reach out to you later and ask not just some of those questions, but to understand better some of the canvassing processes and how they work too. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here. Vice Chair Lucido has a question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Palmer. I echo the same sentiments. I think that you're knowledgeable and, more importantly, necessary to create and to shape policy. And it would make more sense. Did you take any photographs of these boxes, these ballot boxes with the red tags?
I did take a photo of one, yes.
Mr. Chairman, now they've been, did you offer this as part of your testimony, some of these photographs that we can have on file? And are you planning on submitting those to the Attorney General of this state and the U.S. Attorney?
I will include that with my email to all of you.
Through the chair, I don't have a problem with the clerk or whatever it receives it. Do you know whether or not those ballot boxes were being used?
Yes, they were on the floor at TCF Center.
Was that included in your affidavit?
It was not. I did not submit an affidavit as to the events at TCF Center. I was there observing, and I did not want to impact the canvas with what I saw.
But you are a necessary party now,
Yes.
based on your testimony.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Lucido. Seeing no other questions, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Next, I have Karen Cordes, followed by Brian Panabaker, and then a name that I'm absolutely not going to get right, I'm sure, but Hima Kolanagridi from Northville. So if you aren't sure if I pronounced your name correctly, it's Hima from Northville. Okay. Right now we have Ms. Cordes.
Right.
Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Karen O'Brien Cordes, and I'm a registered voter from Novi, Michigan. On a sidebar, I'd like to say that I was so thrilled to work at TCF this year. I'm born and raised in Detroit. My father was a firefighter for the city of Detroit for 35 years, and I love the city. There's 5 points that I think are of interest that I'd like to present today. The first is I applied to be a poll worker weeks or months before the election and was told that they were full. So then I decided that I wanted to be a poll challenger because I wanted to work at TCF. The first thing in the morning before the work started on November 3rd, Mr. Baxter was speaking to the entire community at TCF, and I found it interesting when he asked for a show of hands of how many Republican poll workers there were. From my quick peruse of the view of the room, I saw no hands go up. And I commented to one of the workers that I was with, wow, that's a surprise. I don't see any Republican hands go up. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I then walked over to the tabulator machines and I watched one of the groups of two that were putting the votes in the ballots through the tabulator machine. As the ballots came up, they were rubber banded together in groups of 50 for a total group of 200 that were put through the machines. I counted the ballots, and the ballots that went through the tabulator machine were 196. So I commented to the workers, I said, well, that's kind of interesting because on the laptop, it showed 204 ballots that were counted. But on the tabulator, only 196 went through. So I asked the workers about that, and they said they didn't know why that happened, that they had to put some of them through twice, but they didn't know why, and that I would have to speak to a supervisor. I went back, that was on November 3rd. On November 4th, some of us were summoned to come back that they needed more workers, more challengers. So we went back on November 4th. On the afternoon of November 4th, I believe it was about 4:30 or 5 o'clock when the military ballots came in. And I was working with one particular table when I was witnessing the military ballots. And I found it highly unusual that every military ballot that was logged into the system had a birth date of January 1st, 1900.
You have 1 minute.
And nobody could tell me why the birth dates were 1900. When I went to challenge those votes, the supervisor at the table told me, and I quote, "We're not doing that." So I pressured her. I said, "I want this challenge. I want it noted in the laptop and in the poll book." And she said, "We're not doing that." And I said, "Well, I'm not leaving the table until it gets logged in one of them." So she wrote down in the poll book, Karen Cordes is challenging this vote, and she said, because I told her, is challenging every subsequent ballot hereafter.
Okay. Any questions? So, sorry. So when you say they had a date of birth, was it always January 1st, 1900?
Every one of them.
Huh?
Every one of them. January 1st, 1900.
Okay. No explanation's been provided thus far?
None.
All right. Vice Chair Lucido.
Ma'am, how many, how many did you count like that?
At the particular table I was at, on the screen, I saw about a dozen.
You counted those yourself?
Yes. And in
Nope.
my affidavit, I believe I wrote down the ballot or the voter numbers, registration numbers.
Did they have different names on the ballot? Or?
Yes. And these ballots came in, they were all in envelopes, military ballots. They had been logically mailed back. And I found it interesting because they were all in pretty stationary envelopes. And I thought, oh, well, maybe our military gets gifts from their families or friends of stationery, because every one of them was in really cool-looking stationery.
But they were different?
Yes.
Thank you.
So when you mentioned that you see ballots, and you see signatures, names, date of birth, you're not actually seeing those on the ballot, right? You're seeing those on an envelope.
The date of birth were on the laptop, on the screen.
Okay.
So at the tables, they had a laptop set up over here, and in the corner, there was a larger screen that we could view what was actually on the laptop screen.
But I just want to be clear, I mean, those pieces of evidence are not actually on the ballot
Correct.
itself. Okay. Any other questions from members? All right. Thank you so much for your time today. Next, we have Mr. Brian Pennebecker. After him, we have Hima Colangaretti and then Melissa Carone. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee, sir.
Thank you, Chairman McBroom. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and thank you, Vice Chair Lucido. I appreciate your time. I know it's valuable. I drove through a snowstorm from Macomb County to get here today because I felt it was very important. It was very important to do everything in my power to help preserve the republic that was established 245 years ago. Great patriots gave their lives for this republic, and we're about to see it start slipping away from us if we don't preserve election integrity in this country. So I want to give some general observations of specific events that I witnessed on the 2 days that I served as a poll challenger at the TCF Center in Detroit. And it's important to note that I applied to work at the TCF Center online. I was referred to a website to apply to specifically work at the absentee voter counting board, and I never heard back from them. So I did follow up after a couple weeks of no reply. I called, there were 3 different phone numbers to contact on that website. I called all 3 of them, did not get answers, so I left voicemails at all 3 of those numbers. Again, I did not receive a reply. So at that point, we were within a week or 2 of the election, and I wanted to participate, so I volunteered to work as a poll challenger. Now, I had applied to work there because I heard Detroit was short of poll workers. Obviously, that wasn't true, or else they saw that I identified as a GOP with the GOP party, so they never returned my calls or responded to my application. So that initially I found concerning right off the bat. I did not prepare a statement for my remarks today, so I'll be using the sworn affidavit that I submitted to a lawyer named Sean Flynn, who's working directly with Rudy Giuliani on collecting evidence, sworn statements. I hear in the media all the time that there's no evidence, there's no evidence. We met in Macomb County about 3 weeks ago with Sean Flynn at one of the GOP offices, and he walked out of there with a stack of sworn statements. Statements that, you know, you're familiar with the fact that people made these statements under oath and under the threat of perjury if they lied or were misleading.
1 minute left.
Okay, so 2 of the main observations that I witnessed at the TCF Center on both the 3rd and the 4th when I was there, when I got down there on the morning of the 4th, I went back for an additional day because I witnessed so many irregularities when I was there on Election Day on the 3rd. Immediately upon walking in, I ran into Randy Bishop, and Randy owns radio stations. He's very IT savvy. He said, "Brian, I was here all night. What's going on here is unbelievable." He said, "Let me show you something right now before I leave." So he walked me over to the high-speed scanners and tabulators, and he said, "See all these Ethernet lines running out of the tabulators? They're all bundled together as they accumulate, and then they're all connected to these routers, and then they all go to the main computer." He said, "These are all hooked into the internet, and that is illegal, and it should not be happening because it opens them up to hacking." So I was aware of that immediately when I got there.
That's 3 minutes. Can you put your rest of your remarks in writing for us?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. I'm sorry that we're trying to keep moving. Any questions?
I understand.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you for your time today, sir.
Thanks, Brian.
Next, we have this name that I'm doing very poorly with, Hema. Hema, welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. After her will be Melissa Carone and James Danley. Hema, welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. Can you tell me how to say your last name correctly?
Kolanagi Reddy.
So now everybody else can know.
The moment I saw you holding on to that card, I'm like, that's me. That's got to be me.
Well, you have 3 minutes, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. This is my first time doing this as a poll challenger at TCF. As an immigrant to this country, as you can tell, we had great respect for America, the elections here. We always thought it has a lot of integrity, whereas the countries we come from, a lot of things happen. But all of that changed the day I went there. Like I was at TCF on both the days, 3rd and the 4th. 3rd was pretty much the same monotonous stuff going on, nothing much to note, other than occasional ballot challenging. But the next day is where I noticed a lot of issues. There was a group of people who were like agitators who were trying to get GOP people in trouble. And from my skin color, everybody assumes that I'm a Democrat. And so they just kind of come to me And one of the ladies was thinking that let's get these MFs out. And I'm like, MFs who? Like, because she thought I was a Democrat. Then when I pulled out my tag, she looked at me and she's like, you're on the wrong side. I'm like, how can you say I'm on the wrong side? I pick whoever I want, right? Because this is a free country. But then I noticed that they were going and getting all the white male Republicans out by, just kind of sheer intimidation, just saying, oh, you're mask flipped, you're going to get people killed, like you heard from so many other people. And then what I did was I got trained by both the MIGOP and Election Integrity Fund. So I went to Tim Griffin of Election Integrity Fund and I said, can I have my nonpartisan credentials? And then when I got that badge on, everything changed. Like, people just looked at me differently. I was looked at with a lot of hostility when I had the GOP tag, and now that I have a nonpartisan tag, I was respected at the counting boards. I was respected by the Democrats and the ACLU. And in fact, I was able to even help some of the GOP people from being escorted out by putting myself there and asking why they were even being escorted out and arguing with these people. But the whole environment was so hostile and condescending. And a lot of people have talked about the ballots that were not in the poll book or the system. And I was at a table which had a full stack of this file which said not in EPB/S, which is poll book or system. They were scanning and manually entering them, and the signatures on those sleeves were exactly alike, like a bar graph. And then they were sequential ballot numbers. They started from 2232, and sequence was something that threw me off. I'm like, how does that happen? And most of those people were from the Goddard Street, and they were being entered manually. So those were the observations that I had. I had all the details, the last names and everything. I gave the affidavit to the Election Integrity Fund. The thing that bothered me was that every time a GOP challenger was being escorted out, all the poll workers, Democrats, and everybody else were cheering. And that was very disappointing because these people were just doing their job. They were not attacking. They were not there with guns. They were just volunteering their time, and they were treated with utmost disrespect.
Thank you for your time, your testimony. Could you briefly go back to just a few seconds ago? You mentioned how you saw some ballots that were sequential, and then you described them somehow, and I missed the phrase that you used.
Where
they came from, I think you mentioned?
Yeah, it was from Goddard Street in Wayne County.
Goddard Street, okay.
Yeah, and they all had sequential ballot numbers, and they were being manually fed into the system.
Okay, thank you. Any other members have a question? Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Next, we have Melissa Carone, followed by James Danley, followed by Bobby Tenorio. Ms. Carone, welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee.
Hi,
You have
thank
3
you.
minutes.
Thank you. My name is Melissa Carone. I am a resident of Wayne County. I have a background in IT and cybersecurity. I was contracted by PDS staffing to work with Dominion Voting Systems, assisting with IT at the TCF Center. I started work at 6 a.m. on November 3rd, and I worked until 5 a.m. on November 4th. I returned to work at 10 a.m. November 4th and worked until 2 p.m. November 4th. I was initially supposed to return back to work around 4, but I was told via text through one of the other Dominion workers named Samuel that I wasn't needed, that they were almost finished counting. I wasn't going to mention this, being that it has been mentioned numerous times. I'm going to. I was initially supposed to be working. I was initially supposed to be working at the Department of Elections. That was an order from Dominion Voting Systems. They told me that I would be parking in a parking lot and I would be shuttled in through a shuttle. I called my mother and I told my mother about this, and my mom said, no, absolutely not, you're not doing that. I also had a concern about that because I do have two small young children at home and I needed access to my vehicle. What I witnessed at the TCF Center was complete fraud. The whole 27 hours I was there, there was batches of ballots being ran through the tabulating machines numerous times, being counted 8 to 10 times. I watched this with my own eyes. I was there to assist with IT. These people on night shift, I had 4 people on night shift that I've known. One of them I've known for over 20 years. He approached me and said he had absolutely zero training whatsoever, contradicting 100% what Daniel Baxter claims, that they had so much training. He said they had zero. I watched. These people had no idea what they were doing. Okay. Also, the adjudication process, I witnessed numerous people walking up, claiming they were both Democrats, saying they were sitting together, judging ballots all night together, all day together. I witnessed it all. I was on the main stage with all of the city officials. Daniel Baxter was in on the whole thing, and I am under the impression 100% that at least 90% of those workers were all in on this. There was not a single ballot the whole night, the whole 27 hours I was there, that I saw that was for Donald Trump. Not one, not a single ballot. That is scary. There is no reason for that. Also, I'm gonna say that there was something going on at that Department of Elections, and it's clearly something that's very illegal that occurred there, and I am grateful to God that I did not go there.
Thank you. So, Vice Chair Lucido has a question.
Sure.
You were employed by whom to do what?
Okay, so I am a freelance IT worker.
Okay.
I was employed by PDS, P as in Paul, D as in David, S as in Sam, staffing, to assist with IT work for Dominion. At
The software
TCF.
company.
Dominion Voting Systems, correct. I was with Nick Autonomagis. He's
Why were-
my manager.
I apologize, but this is very, why did they feel that they needed to have assistance there for the software?
So a couple people have asked me the same question. I cannot answer that. These people were very secretive, and I will say that these people were very, very secretive and just really pushy. Never did I ever admit I was a Republican to these people. The comments that they were making were disgusting.
Regardless of Republican, Democrat, Independent, Green, doesn't matter. I'm getting right to the heart of it. What was the instated purpose that the software company needed to have the assistance of support staff for IT?
I believe that it was because Nick and Samuel, that are permanent employees of Dominion, Nick is a part owner, that they had to be together on the stage working together. So it looked like they had assistance with IT. Now, I was also not allowed to wear a badge or tell anybody who I was working with.
That's fine. So your opinion that it was them that needed to be there, you don't know anything that was contractual, you don't know if there was anything that was going glitchy, which means that there was.
Oh, I know of a lot of stuff that.
But my question is, factually, which
Yeah.
means today, as you sit here, is there anything you can tell us
Yes.
that was happening with the software where Nick and
Okay. So
Samuel had to go assist in this?
Absolutely.
What was that?
Okay, so Samuel was missing for about 3 hours. When he returned, I said, "Where were you?" He said, "I was at the warehouse." I said, "Where's this warehouse?" And I said, "Is it an Amazon warehouse? I don't know. What kind of warehouse is it, right?" And he said, "We call it the Chicago warehouse." And I said, "Okay, so it's in Chicago?" Because they're from Colorado. I said, "So it's in Chicago?" And he said, "No, Melissa, it's in Detroit. We call it the Chicago warehouse." I said, "Okay," and I just walked away. But there was something very secretive that he was doing. There was also they said a big data loss right before they sent Samuel to this warehouse.
What time was that?
That was when Samuel went to the warehouse. That was approximately, It was in the afternoon. I believe it was around 2 or 3,
Is that on the 3rd or the 4th?
the 3rd.
Thank you. I'm okay. You have written testimony for the chair?
I have my
And the
second
committee?
affidavit, and I have what I was speaking off of just now.
Could you send that to us, please?
Absolutely.
Include your phone number if you could, in case we
Absolutely.
have questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Before you go, please,
Sure.
I have a question.
Mhm.
When you testify about ballots being counted multiple times, what are you basing that analysis that they were counted multiple times?
Okay. So, I'm sorry. So the tabulating machines, when a ballot jams, it puts up an error. It'll say discard or recount. So when it puts up that error, when a jam occurs, the correct way to go about it is to discard the whole batch, take the ones that have already been tabulated, put them back into a pile, put the one that jammed on top, and then discard the whole thing, and then rescan them. They were not discarding. So they were just rescanning, counting ballots 8 to 10 times, just recounting them. They had absolutely no idea what they were doing.
So you're saying that they were literally opening up the box, taking the ballots back out of the box, and then sending them through again?
No, they
Okay.
were just taking, so
wanna be
when a
clear on this.
ballot, okay, so when a ballot was, when the error came up on the PC in front of them, and it said that a jam occurred, I would go try, because it happened so many times in a 27-hour period. Each machine, it did it between 2 and 3 times an hour. So, because these were folded ballots, they're mail-in ballots. So, when it occurred, and then it threw up the error, discard, rescan. As I just stated, you are supposed to take the problem ballot that got jammed, put it on top of the whole pile, discard it, because that's why the option is there. If you do not discard it, it is recounting it. So they would take the ones that were, say ballot number 25 had an issue. You had already went through 24 ballots. So you're going to put them back all in a pile, and you're just going to rescan it. So it's counting those 24 again, instead of discarding those 24 and restarting.
Oh, but that's what I was trying to ask. I mean, so they're literally taking,
Did I answer correctly?
You're saying that they're taking ballots that already went through the machine, taking them and scanning them a second time.
That's absolutely what I said, yes.
So help me understand, 'cause I haven't worked in AV counting center. I've been to my precinct, and when our ballots go into the tabulator, there's no access to them after they're accepted. I mean, they go into a sealed box.
Oh,
There's no
no,
access
these
to
ones,
them.
no, I've heard that too from other states, that they do drop directly into a steel box. No, the steel boxes were behind them, which I could say a lot about that too, but I won't. But they were using those for barriers for the poll watchers so they couldn't get close, the steel boxes. But no, they were 100% in the counter's hands. This whole process, they were allowed to do whatever they wanted to do. Nick and Samuel that worked for Dominion, they were on the stage. They had a contract employee, me, and another one that was from Texas. I have his name right here, Miles Smiley, 90-year-old man there to assist with IT work. He did not have any kind of background in IT and worked in and lived in Tennessee. So this man was just walking around aimlessly. I was really the only one running around like crazy helping these people.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm not aware that it.
No, and they were responsible.
The machines I've been exposed to don't work that same way, so I was just checking in on that. Senator Tice.
So I'm trying to figure out the whole line of everything here. So you were trained to work with the equipment and the tabulators themselves?
Correct.
And they were going to send you to the Department of Elections?
Initially, that is
So
where
do
I
they
was
have
scheduled.
Tabulators at the Department of Elections?
That's the main question here, huh? Because I was trained on the tabulation and adjudication process, and how many people just came up before me stating that they saw people walking in and out of that Department of Elections. with ballots. As I stated, I was not supposed to even talk about this today,
And
but
then
I'm going
as they're
to.
scanning, they have a pile of them, they're putting them through a scanner, and the pile, once it's gone through the scanner, is still fully accessible to the person who's
Absolutely.
doing the count.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
They could scan them 50 times if they wanted to.
Any other members have a question? Senator Lucido?
Yeah,
Senator,
this is interesting. You were trained to oversee tabulators. Is that what you told us?
I was trained to assist with IT
In tabulators?
and the adjudication process, correct, sir?
Who trained you to use
Dominion.
your technique on the tabulators as it relates to the IT?
Dominion.
Dominion did. Was it their representatives that came to the TCF Center?
It was the owner of Dominion, Nick Economagnis, that came to the TCF Center, which is extremely insane because he's like the top of the top with Dominion, which is, he's missing.
When
He's
did you
gone.
meet with them at the TCF Center to get your training?
Okay, so my training was in Allen Park at the hotel they were staying at, right off of Southfield Freeway. It was November 2nd for 1 hour.
The day before the elections?
November 2nd, correct.
The day
sir.
before the election?
Yes, sir.
1 hour training. Was it done by video or was it done with a tabulator?
It was done with a tabulating machine and an adjudication machine in a room, in a conference room, and all we did was walk around it and nothing. We were given a binder, I have it right here, from Dominion about all their image cast, about how their software works. I have every Dominion employee here. I have the ones that were at
How many were with
the
you in
warehouse.
this? How many?
5 total.
5 total.
2 contract employees, 3 permanent employees of Dominion. Let me just say this, there was 1 permanent employee of Dominion. She went by the name of Danielle. Her real name was China, which she told me later. She's the one who told me Nick was a part owner, which was confirmed later on. She was acting very bizarre the whole night, would start crying, would start saying she couldn't handle being there.
Okay.
I saw the van come in at 4:30 full of ballots. That she left an hour before that, had someone pick her up.
thank you.
Chairman, as long as we get her testimony, I would be intrigued to look at whatever you have
Absolutely,
through the chair.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Vice Chair.
Thank
Hold on. I have another question for you, ma'am. Please. Please. Vice Chair Irwin has a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I were to take a ballot, an absentee ballot, and I were to run that through a machine multiple times, and that ballot were to be counted multiple times, is that machine going to reflect those votes in the vote total at the end of the day? And is that ballot going to be recorded in the poll book 8 times or something? I mean, what's the...
Why do you think the poll books were so off?
Well, they were off a little bit less than they were in previous elections, so unless
No,
your
they were
allegation
off.
is that...
They were off, 100%.
Excuse me, members of the audience, please respect the
Sorry, I mean,
the
you asked me a
witness
question,
and-
what do
Ma'am,
you expect the answer to
Excuse
I was
me.
hoping for an answer, but I don't
Ma'am.
think I'm going to get one.
Excuse me. I couldn't hear what was going on because too many people talking over each other. So if you could please, Mr.
Sure.
Vice Chair, finish your line of questioning. I'd like to hear the end of it, please.
That was the end of it. There was just one question, which was that, you know, if this were to happen, it would show up in the tabulations being off. And we know,
They were off.
do we know to what extent that they're off?
They were off.
Right, yeah, we know that.
So why are you asking, what are you asking me?
I'm trying to ask you, if
Sir.
someone were to,
Go ahead.
if someone were to go and run the same ballot
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again, that would end up showing up as a massive discrepancy, right?
Did
And
I
we've
say
added up the
somebody took a ballot
discrepancies.
and ran it over and over and over again?
You
Just
did-
one ballot? Or a batch of 50?
Either way, I mean, the batch of
Right.
50 is going to be even more.
If you take one and you run it over and over and over again, yeah, people are going to notice that that one has been ran over and over. I had numerous challengers come up to me and say, what's going on here? One guy got thrown out because he took a picture of me.
Sure, I'm just wondering why the numbers at the end of the day aren't matching up with the stories that we're hearing. I'm trying to square that circle. And I know there's going to be an investigation of all of these
As good as everybody
allegations.
else's in here.
Yeah, there's
Why
going to be an
isn't it
investigation
why
of all
isn't it
this, and we're
matching
going to look
up?
into all
It's
these
not
details.
matching up.
Ma'am,
Everything
ma'am.
that happened at that TCF center was fraud.
Ma'am.
Every single thing. Every avenue was
Excuse me.
taken to commit it.
Please. Appreciate your passion, but he feels his question was answered. Appreciate that. I do have one additional follow-up.
Sure.
You mentioned observing ballots arriving
Yes, sir.
late. Do you have knowledge of where they came from?
I cannot say that for 100%. I do not know 100%.
Okay,
Do I assume where they came from? Absolutely.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Senator McDonald, thank you.
I'll be brief. Your testimony was very compelling. So I just want to go back to what I asked Senator Colbeck. Where is the Department of Justice in this? I mean, without arresting it, I mean, are they even looking into it? I mean, your testimony is unbelievably compelling. So I'm just wondering, where are they?
Okay. Your question is as good as mine. So I did call the FBI on November 5th, and
Okay.
I spoke with a woman for at least 40 minutes. The phone disconnected. She had all my information. She never called me back. I had to call them back. I haven't been contacted back since.
Well, you would think that, did you contact anybody from the Trump campaign?
Oh, yeah. I've been
Wouldn't they
talking to
have a pipeline to the Department of Justice? Well, I mean,
I've been talking to attorneys. What I said just now regarding the Department of Elections and how I was scheduled to work there, that is coming out. That is coming out. That will be coming out next week. There's a lot coming. I was not even supposed to talk about that, but a lot of people mentioned it. So you know what? I'm going to tell you guys about it because this is fraud.
okay.
And there was fraudulent activity occurring there.
Thank you. Your testimony was excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, ma'am, for being here. Next, we have James Danley, and he'll be followed by Bobby Tenorio, and then Austin Kreutz. Welcome, Mr. Danley.
Thank you, committee members.
You have 3 minutes.
Appreciate the time. Well, I'm trying not to waste it, but I want to see what kind of time I got here. Okay, it's items that occurred during the election and subsequent counting process. My name is James H. Danley, and I was a poll challenger at the TCF Center on Tuesday 11/3 and Wednesday 11/4. I've signed and submitted a 13-page affidavit to those items which I witnessed personally. The following are only a few of the most egregious items witnessed. I was not allowed to perform my job, and from what I observed, were any of the GOP challengers in accordance with Michigan laws. We were constantly prevented from getting close enough to see what was going on with the respect to the ballots. Procedures were not being properly followed. When we brought these to the attention of the supervisors, our concerns were dismissed and ignored. We observed ballots being backdated from 11/4 to 11/2, and data being entered into the computers for these mail-in ballots. Poll workers were entering ballot information from new mail-in ballots, including dates of birth of 1/1/1900, into the electronic poll books and processing those ballots for tabulation. The information wasn't in either the electronic poll book or the book prior to that. There's been lots and lots of reports after the election counting process. First of all, I did email a copy of what I'm reading from to each of the Republican senators and the House of Representative members. So I'd be happy to provide this to you. Dead people were voting. I sent a website to that effect, and the list that they had up to that date was 17,327 randomly checked Michigan voters that were registered for voting and were above the age of 80. Every name on this list has voted in the 2020 election. Check for yourself, and has also been found in one or more of the obituaries online. This is the most important election in my lifetime, and I think the most important election in the history of our republic. Every legislator, whether seated in the House or the Senate, whether Democrat or Republican, took an oath to defend the U.S. and state constitutions of the U.S. and Michigan against enemies both foreign and domestic. Time is of the essence, and now is the time to fulfill that oath. Despite what the media is telling everyone, there are mountains of evidence that voter fraud occurred on a massive scale, the likes of which we've never witnessed in the country.
30 seconds.
For those politicians that say we have to tighten up the election process relative to mail-in ballots for future elections, you admit that there are problems, and you propose to fix those problems sometime in the future. I and millions of Americans say no. You must fulfill your oath and do your duty to the citizens of the state and country now. You can't turn a blind eye to the mountains of evidence proving the fraud, and the citizens of this state expect the state legislators to act swiftly to correct the fraudulent activity that took place in this election. Because time is of the essence, this cannot wait for the completion of the lawsuits currently underway.
Thank you, sir.
I did submit this to each of you. I would appreciate it if you would go through it thoroughly, read the articles that I've attached to it.
Thank you, sir.
And we appreciate it. Thank you.
Any questions? The committee will go at ease for 5 minutes.
They're not giving me details. I mean, they really aren't. The problem is, they don't know. They only know about the mission.
That was about almost just over 2 hours, I guess, of initial testimony. We are live. If you're just now joining us, we are in Lansing, Michigan for the public discussion, the Senate oversight hearings here in Michigan in regards to the 2020 presidential election. Before we get into a recap of what we found out, we do want to make sure that we let you know that all of this is brought to you by our friends Mike Lindell and Lilith Phillip. We are so thankful to have Mike and MyPillow.com a part of this team here at Right Side.
Yes, and please use our code RSBN at checkout at mypillow.com to get a huge saving. And with Christmas coming around the corner, you can not only shop for your human beings that you love, but you can also shop for your pets as well. So check them out at mypillow.com. Use our discount code RSBN at checkout.
Yeah, get up to 66% off on a lot of their products there. So we're happy to have Mike Lindell and MyPillow.com a part of this broadcast today. But that just, it looks like they took a short 5-minute break, but let's just kind of fill up your thoughts over the last couple of hours. We have heard numerous testimony come out in regards to voter fraud here in the state of Michigan.
Contentious. People are explaining their cases of why they think that there was voter fraud, and there clearly was voter fraud. There is dead people voting. That is fraud. That is a definition of fraud, and people have explained that to the senators who are here today. There has been some pushback from the Democrat senators, I presume, who are sitting on this oversight committee. But the people are still here. They're bringing their case forward. They said they've been in contact with federal law enforcement, whether it be the FBI. They've also been in contact with the DOJ. I'm sure you've heard all that through watching the people here today. But it's contentious. People are really fed up, and that just, you can see it based upon the people who are outside. They realize that this election, there was major fraud in this election, and it'll start to unfold over the course of time. Right now, we just have to wait, and we have to go through the process, though.
It almost seems defiant, Lilith. You and I looked at each other several times during this, and of course some of the votes coming out of Wayne County historically have been Democrats, and one of the things I brought up here silently was, what if that's been corrupt year after year? This whole thing needs to be broken apart and re-examined.
I couldn't help myself but jot down some notes here on my phone. Some of the witness testimonies were absolutely outstanding. I had to let you know what's been going on. So the first thing that they mentioned right off the bat was Ethernet cables. So they were talking about the internet connection and how it causes for outsiders to hack into the system. So there's Ethernet cables attached to one another, and so when you have one device that's attached to the internet in that service, are all attached, so people can actually hack into the system and, think for yourself, fill in the blank of what they might be doing with that. People were also able to get the admin passwords to these servers via the dark web. So anybody from another country maybe could even hack into the United States election here. And so also 8.1 million registered voters in Michigan, and in just Detroit alone, 174,000 absentee ballots, 1,300 of them were deceased.
Yeah. We have heard so much, and also in terms of voter intimidation and not allowing Republican poll watchers to be allowed in these rooms. We've heard stories.
And they're cheering us. The GOP watchers are being removed out of these, TCF. They're just clapping them on as the GOP watchers are being removed.
Yeah, this is what, and that kind of stood out to me.
Yeah,
Philip.
I also think it's important to note for our friends who will try to censor us for sharing this information that obviously not everything here is 100% verified, but these are sworn statements under oath, punishable by perjury. And that's simply what we're doing today here is we're presenting the information that is being presented to the Oversight Committee. So we're going to continue to do so, but there are certainly legitimate claims of fraud in this election.
And we saw some of that pushback earlier by some of the people on the panel, and it comes to a point where even here in the room, people sign a little bit like, why are we so defiant on just trying to answer these questions that are presented to the panel, and that we've seen some discrepancies in the voter machines. We've seen logistically it's impossible to run some of these votes through a machine multiple times.
When you notice a pushback just from the panel, you start to realize the bigger picture,
The bigger picture.
When you look at locally how corrupt it is locally, and for all these people to not have their voice, 8.1 million registered voters in Michigan, to feel like they're not being heard locally. Imagine that on a grander scale. Imagine what President Trump is fighting.
Absolutely. And of course, President Trump has been active in our broadcast as well. We post it, the live stream here. And of course, we want you to do the same. You can tag a friend, share this live post, because I think it might get interesting on the other side of the table. I do want to mention that outside there are several supporters. So you probably see them through the windows,
And
guys.
it's freezing out there.
It's
They've
freezing.
been out there since 9
And they
a.m.
have been very vocal into the window, stop the steal. And I think that perhaps they're listening to this broadcast outside, so they're getting all the information in this room. Now point out at another floor, there's an overflow room here as well. So we got about 45 to 50 people here on the floor. But if you're just now joining us, we are here in Lansing. Of course, this is a part of the Michigan public hearing. We've heard, I was in Pennsylvania, very different scene there, Philip.
I was about to ask you,
It was a
how
very
was that?
different scene there in Pennsylvania. It was almost like in a very encouraging environment where everyone wanted to find the truth. And I'm not talking about just echoing a sentiment here. It's they wanted to find out what was going on. I got to say, there's people in this room that don't necessarily want that to come out.
I mean, I agree 100%. I said it earlier. There is some contention in this room from the people who are sitting on the board of this oversight committee, and they're giving the people pushback and they're giving the people flack who are trying to present their evidence of voter fraud. Let's go ahead and turn the camera back.
And looks like we're getting back into the second half of the events here in Lansing.
For a little 5-minute leg stretch, we'll resume testimony. Next up, we have Bobby Tenario, followed by Dr. Michael Dubiel. I'm sorry, cards got a little shuffled here. And so it was Bobby Tenario, followed by Austin Kreutz, and then Dr. Michael Dubiel. Oh, my mistake. You're the first one who marked that, so I hadn't even been looking at that box anymore. So, Austin Kreutz, are you available? Austin Kreutz. Austin. After him will be Dr. Michael Dubiel, followed by Michael Halls or Halves. Anyone seen Austin Kreutz? Is Dr. Dubiel available? Michael Haves or Halls available? It might be Haynes. Yeah, it could be. Jacqueline Zaplinty or Zaplet? It definitely starts with a Z. Lori Eba. I'm going to run through these names one last time, but we can't hold up the show forever. Austin Kreutz. Jacqueline, please go ahead. I will keep these other cards on top briefly for after Jacqueline's testimony in case they're indisposed at the moment. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. You have 3 minutes.
Dual credentialed for Election Day this year. I worked at a precinct 205 at Mason Elementary School in Detroit during the day, and then I also worked at the TCF Center that evening as a poll challenger. So I've submitted my written testimony, also an affidavit to you today, affidavit that I had submitted with the Trump campaign previously, so you have a copy of both of those. There was a couple questions that I wanted to answer that I heard earlier, so I'm going to kind of go off script, but I don't think you guys realize that on when you go to vote in person and you're feeding your ballot into a tabulator box, and I was the tabulator inspector at Precinct 205 in Detroit, it goes in. If there's an error, it comes right back out at you. You see the screen, you have an option to either correct your ballot or resubmit it as is. So then it goes into the locked box. It is never opened until the end of the day after polls close at 8 p.m. And then it is, opened up, processed, put into sealed envelopes, and so forth. So the high-speed tabulators look more like, that were at the TCF Center, look more like a printer. And so they were fed 50 ballots at a time, sometimes in stacks of up to like 200. They were each, individually rubber band at 50 at a time was the way we were taught, that's directed to do. And they just came out the back. They were in a bin there, an open bin. So they could grab them all and refeed them. So I don't know if, you all had a clear picture of that sense of, they were just open and available to basically, you get an error, grab it back, feed it through again. So that's where a lot of the repetition, I think, happened. Also, as far as training is concerned, I did 2 classes. Each were for about an hour. I was trained as a poll worker, which then I was credentialed as a ballot box inspector in the precinct. Then I was also trained as a poll challenger, which was for about an hour also, and then credentialed as a poll challenger, which I worked at the TCF Center. So I kind of had a little bit of a advantage, I felt like, because I did both trainings. However, both trainings were pretty ridiculous. Really didn't teach you much of anything. There were multiple multiple copies of things that were, you were presented with and able to take home. You could reference later, but the training was really non-existent.
Thank you.
So,
I appreciate your testimony, and I was going to actually ask if you could explain why you feel the training was not helpful.
Well,
or adequate?
as a poll worker, I trained at Wayne County Community College. There was just no substance to it. There was no, other than working through the copies of the information that were given, there was no substance. They didn't tell you anything. They didn't say what to do if there was an error. Who do you contact? You were given like minimal to no information.
Who provided
to
this
utilize-
training?
The Detroit or Wayne County Department of Elections.
Okay.
Also, you were almost threatened or taught to threaten a poll challenger. They came right out and said, you don't have to listen to them, you don't have to speak to them, they can't get near you, they cannot talk to you, you don't answer them, and if they continue to question you, then call the police. Literally, that's what the instructor told us to do. Call the police, have them removed.
Thank you. Any other members have a question? Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Okay, going back to the top of the pile, Austin T. Kreutz. Has anyone seen Austin T. Kreutz? All right. Dr. Michael Dubiel? Okay. Michael Haynes or Halls? Lori Eba, please come on up. And then on deck, we will have Braden Giocabazi and Andrew Miller. Welcome, Ms. Eba.
Thank you so much. I am a resident of Oakland County. I live in Milford. I've been here all my life, not necessarily in Milford. I grew up in Detroit. I was a Republican poll challenger both on Tuesday and Wednesday. On Tuesday, things went pretty well, and I was trained by the GOP party. Tuesday, things went very well. When I was called back in early on Wednesday morning, I came back into the room. I could not believe, number one, how many more people were there, the tension in the room, and where did all these ballots come from? When I'd left on Tuesday, most of the tables had been complete. The table I was overseeing at the time still had about 200 ballots left, but it certainly didn't look like there was going to even be enough for a night shift. I was very surprised to see the level of activity on the following morning. As you've already heard from many people who've had my positions, there was a lot of intimidation and hostility vented toward the Republican challengers. I experienced a lot of that as well. Right away, of course, we know rules were broken because there were very, very few. I counted less than 5 when there was the hand raise of Republican poll workers in the room. There's supposed to be 1 at every counting table, at least, and there wasn't. I didn't see the ones back at the tabulator areas or the adjudication, so there may have been a few more back there, but I counted less than 5. In addition, by midday on Wednesday, there were no more Republicans allowed into the room. There was a lot of intimidation around those who were in the room, particularly the men and the lawyers, and they were hauled out forcibly by the police for really no good reason, while the whole room of workers cheered. This is intimidating. They stood and they cheered repeatedly as Republicans were hauled out for doing their job. This is wrong. I personally was the victim of 2 different accounts of intimidation, one by workers, supervisors included, and one by Republican poll challengers or watchers. In both cases, I had raised my hand to challenge a ballot. In one case, the ballot was being duplicated. I was being prevented from watching because only 2 workers were doing it, and they were shoulder to shoulder. I'd moved in to about 3 feet or so behind them so I could look over their shoulders. The supervisor came over and told me I had to get out of there at least 6 feet away. I told her that by the rules, election rules, I could move in during the time that I was watching the ballot while it was being duplicated.
1 minute left.
She was yelling at me. And that ballot ended up being duplicated in error. We got a high enough supervisor to stop that. The second time I was surrounded by Democrat challengers who, again, were yelling at me, calling me a racist, telling me my mother didn't love me, all kinds of, stupid but meant to intimidate things. This is wrong. We all deserve a fair ability to vote our conscience and to participate in the election process. This did not happen at TFC, and it needs to be audited, and we're counting on you to do it. Thank you. I've submitted my comments, so you can read the whole thing on your own.
Thank you very much, Ms.
Thank you.
Eba. Anyone have any questions? Okay, thank you very much for your time today. Next, the doctor is here? All right. Dr. Michael Dubiel. Then on deck is still Braden Giacobasi, and then Andrew Miller. Dr. Dubiel, I apologize, we took that little break there, and I hadn't read who was on deck, so people might have gotten a little far away, so appreciate your forbearance. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I was a poll challenger at TCF Center. I worked 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. I saw a few things, and I tried to make several statements to several different organizations, and I had nobody really follow up with me. Or when I did get a statement back from my affidavit, it was different from what I had spoke over the phone. A few things that I saw, right off the bat, I saw table supervisors distinguished with the emblem on the chest, wearing political statements. Saw Black Lives Matter on masks. I saw t-shirts, undershirts wearing Black Lives Matter, which is, I didn't know was appropriate. The table I worked at, I saw several ballots that I challenged. One, when through the process, the scanning of the ballot, the computer popped up a little box that said duplicate ballot already processed. I challenged that. I saw a ballot that was opened up that was completely blank, front and back. At the end of the night, I asked my table supervisor if our numbers matched and if it reconciled. She said it did. And then she told me, we decided to take the ballots that were challenged, the provisional ballots, and they will be tabulated. She told me the tabulator ultimately uncovers errors with ballots, that they would be spoiled by the tabulator. And I thought that was interesting. And I asked her again, and she assured me that tabulator would correct the error. And that's interesting because when I gave that statement over the phone, that was never put in my affidavit. And I have yet to make an affidavit because I tried to give it to a couple of people and nobody's followed up with me. Or if they followed up with me, it was inaccurate information.
1 minute left.
Okay. And to me, that's a big deal. I also saw the ballots being dropped off about, 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. I was actually standing next to the lead attorney, and we were all talking about why are these ballots showing up as late as they did. I thought that was interesting. Those were the main things that I saw. When I first arrived, this was interesting as well. I was wearing a mask, and I was fidgeting with it because it was itchy. There was a gentleman who was a table supervisor. Again, he had the emblem on his breast. And he basically called me a bioterrorist. Basically said I was killing people. We're in the middle of a pandemic. And he was going to kick me out if I continued to itch my face because I was wearing an itchy mask. And I kept on trying to ask him, does everybody have to have this standard of wearing a mask? Because I saw numerous workers not wearing masks properly. Eventually, as he called me an agitator, I pointed to a gentleman. I said, does he have to wear his mask? And he didn't respond to me. And I wanted to stay in there because he told me he was going to arrest me because he identified himself as a Wayne County, working for the Wayne County Sheriff's Department.
Thank you. I would like to know about the ballot that you said you saw that was blank.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what the disposition of that became?
What do you mean, the disposition of that?
What happened to it?
It was put in the folder to be tabulated, and it was ran through the tabulator from what my table supervisor told me.
But it was blank, so.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
She said then the tabulator would uncover that, and then it would be spoiled at that time.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was another ballot that you challenged specifically?
Absolutely, because when they scanned it, the little window
Said it was
popped
the
up on the
duplicate.
computer. It said duplicate already processed.
So what happened with that?
So
Do you know
they
that?
initially put it into the provisional ballot folder like they should have.
Okay.
And I thought that was great. And I was like, awesome, we got a process that's working here. And then when I went up at the end of my shift, because I was told there was going to be reinforcements. So I left at 5 a.m. It was a long day. And I'm from Grand Rapids. She told me that all of the ballots in the provisional folder would be taken out and put into the folder to be tabulated because the tabulator would uncover the error. The tabulator would find out that this was a duplicate ballot. And I asked her that twice because I was under the impression that the tabulator is a counter. So I asked her, how will the tabulator uncover that? She told me, and she assured me, the tabulator would uncover the error.
Okay. All right. Any other members have a question? Senator Santana, please.
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned that some of the people had on shirts that said black people matter, right? Or what did you
Black
say?
Lives
Black Lives
Matter.
Matter, yeah, okay. Did anybody have on a shirt that said, vote for this person, vote for that person?
Not that I was aware of.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
But distinguished on the face masks,
All right.
and it was, I want to make this clear, it was underneath the T-shirt of the table supervisors. It wasn't outward, it was underneath the T-shirt that they were wearing.
I understand.
Chairman.
Thank you.
With all due respect, I mean, there's a sign right here that says black votes for Trump. So, I mean,
I don't believe that, I don't believe that there is a statute that prohibits the wearing of non-political candidate shirts, so it may, so now, on to Senator Tice, please.
Thank you very much. So thank you for your testimony today. I have a question about, you said between 3:34, you said that there were ballots that came in late. Can you tell me what it is specifically that you saw that came in? Were you outside and you watched the truck and you watched them unload, or were you inside and watched them bring in the ballots? What was your...
Well, I was inside the TCF Center, and I
Okay.
watched them bring ballots in on carts, boxes of ballots.
So they were like open boxes where you could see the ballots in, or you
Yeah,
saw them?
they were no different than the ones that were already there. And then what they did is they put them out, and so there was a center raised stage, and then they had tables off to the side, and they would put the ballots off where they were already picking up the ballots, how they were doing normal business, right? I was under the impression that all of those should have been segregated and separated. Well, they weren't. They were put right up there, and then the person or the people that were running the election process basically encouraged the table supervisors in the tables to come up and get work. That's how they were describing it. Come up and get work. Come up and get work. So those ballots, they were running ballots.
Thank you. Senator Tice, did you have more questions? Or?
Just one more. Did you have any idea how many there were, or do you have any way of knowing?
Yeah, so the attorney that was there, or the counsel that was there, we were all trying to take a rough estimate, and it looked like there was maybe 60 boxes of those ballots, and in each one of those sleeves or boxes or whatever, there could have been hundreds of ballots. So we're thinking maybe several thousand, tens of thousands. I'm not sure the exact number. Because who knows how stuffed they were? Who knows? But I definitely saw those ballots come in. Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Do you have any idea where anybody say where all this came from?
No.
All right,
And I left my table to go over there because I was curious about that.
Okay. Senator Lucido?
Yeah, it's intriguing. What time of the morning was it when you saw this come in? Or what time of the evening was it?
Like I said, 3-ish, 4 in that window.
In the afternoon?
No. I was there from
3 or 4 in the morning?
I was there at 10 p.m. to 5 a.m.
They were in mail sleeves, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody have any earmarkings of who they were carrying these ballots? Were they carrying them? Were they on a dolly?
Yeah, they were on a dolly. Yeah, they were on a dolly. Do I know who they were? Absolutely not. But there were people that were doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lucido. Senator Santana?
was there any particular reason you didn't ask for a supervisor to question, the ballots coming in on a dolly or?
Well, I didn't figure I needed to because the lead counsel that was supposed to be there was taking tally, and I was there standing right next to him. So I figured he was kind of the person that was overseeing the whole night. That's what we were told. No, we were talking directly about why are these coming in. We all thought it was interesting that these ballots were coming in so late. What was his response? We were trying to take. Sorry.
What was his response, sir?
We were taking count, and we were his exact response I couldn't recall, but we were definitely perplexed that these were coming in so late, as well as they were being put out to be counted.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate it. I have a large stack of cards yet to go through and would very much like to provide this opportunity for those who've taken the time to be here. If there is somebody here who has some credibility with the crowd and has the opportunity to share with them that their disorder is only disrupting what they're trying to accomplish, I'd appreciate you taking that time to do that. Otherwise, I'll have to be forced to adjourn the meeting if it gets so difficult to hear anymore. So. We'll continue. I'm not stopping the meeting at this point. I'm just suggesting that somebody suggests to the audience outside that they are disrupting the meeting in here, and it will cease if they can't control themselves. If the audience inside also needs that same assistance, we can adjourn the meeting for that reason too. I have worked hard to put this together, and I would appreciate the opportunity to continue the work and listen to the folks who've taken the time to be here. At this time, next up, we have Braden Giocabazi. After him, I have Andrew Miller, followed by Robert Cushman. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee, sir. You have 3 minutes.
Is based on my sworn affidavit that I submitted. I am an unaffiliated Michigan voter who was trained by the GOP to be a poll challenger on Wednesday, November 4th, beginning in the late morning until around 8 p.m. because I was told that they needed help. They were understaffed. I witnessed the room erupt in thunderous applause and derogatory cheering as Republican poll workers were picked off one by one and ejected from the room repeatedly by police escort throughout the day. By the end of the day, they had picked off so many GOP poll workers that there were probably only a few dozen left to monitor all of the processing stations in the room, which I'm told was between 130 and 160. Because of this, I had to move between several tables. One was processing a stack of roughly 35 ballots with pink challenge stickers on them. Many other tables also had similar stacks on them as well. None of the ballots appeared to be in the poll database, so the poll workers were simply entering 1/1/1900 as the birth dates and entering the addresses and names that no one seemed to be verifying and which I could not see to verify. When I would politely try to check such things, as had been the case throughout the entire day, I was told that I wasn't allowed within 6 feet of the tables even to verify ballots, and told that I was trying to kill people. I watched as the tables simply passed in mismatched ballots and envelopes through the checking station. When I challenged it, and subsequent ballots that weren't in the poll book, the table supervisor laughed and said, "You can't do that." And several other operatives gave me the COVID runaround as I had gotten throughout the day, all trying to intimidate me and prevent me from doing my job, claiming that I was endangering their workers, trying to kill their people, and even holding a pen in a threatening way. Yet, when non-GOP operatives would stand near the tables and harass me, no one would give them any problem at all. At one point, a Democrat who was hanging back came up to harass me, and then a table supervisor showed up and because I was challenging a ballot. Once several table managers and non-GOP operatives have showed up to harass me, this Democrat operative simply melted back into the background with a satisfied grin on his face, knowing that he had caused me a problem. These people were like professional agitators whose job it was to sow discord among GOP workers who were trying to do their job and then get them kicked out. At some point, a GOP lawyer was brought in and confirmed that I was properly performing my duties. Instead of backing down, the table supervisor's supervisor and his supervisor and all the damn supervisors, they came up and they started arguing with the lawyer, telling him he didn't know what the law was.
1 minute.
In the meantime, the ballots continued to go through, so I stepped up to the table to inspect the next ballot briefly. The manager separated me from the table, wielding COVID as a weapon one more time, and walking towards me, forcing me to step further away. He made some innuendo about playing with him that made me uncomfortable. And then he said something to the effect of, "I will kick your ass or I will kick you out of here." And I said, and I looked at him and I quizzically, and I said, "Are you threatening me?" He repeated the mantra more than once as he began to wave down a police officer. I raised my voice so that others could hear what was going on. And at this point, and I said, "Are you threatening me?" And at this point, the police officer arrived, and I did not ask any questions, and I was removed from the room without any due process. Realizing I had no recourse or rights, I grabbed my coat, and I peacefully was escorted. I'd like to say one final thing.
Please wrap it up.
Okay. I saw several dozen military ballots throughout the day. I only saw 3 that were for President Trump, and I was also at your hearing the other day when the clerks were testifying. And one thing that stood out to me as a glaringly obvious thing, as an engineer, I'm a technical person. I love math. I have a fair bit of programming under my belt. Those people were not IT specialists. They know nothing. I assume they appeared to know nothing about programming, and yet they said multiple times throughout that hearing that it was the most secure election in history. And I would like to say that it seems like they have no credentials to be able to say that.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions? Senator McDonald.
Yeah, it's kind of a question for the group. I've been hearing a lot of troubling stories about harassment. So sick, I don't even want to say them. You're saying people call you a murderer, they're going to kick your ass, all these things. It sounds like there's a lot of experience in this room, poll watching. Have any of you ever experienced anything to that level ever before, any other election process?
So,
never? Is this, it seems unprecedented, the type of stories that you're sharing, so.
This was my first election. I didn't come there to agitate. I think I'm a likable guy. I came in there on Wednesday because I was told they were understaffed, so I thought this would be a good chance to just see how the process works. If I would have thought that it was going to be that much of a madhouse against the GOP people and it was so biased, I would have been there every day. I was not there with an agenda. I was there to just do my job, and they didn't like that simply because I had a GOP lanyard on, even though I'm an unaffiliated voter. They didn't know that.
Sounds like from the stories you're sharing, it was a complete sideshow. Hopefully
Like I
that
said,
doesn't continue.
Professional agitator. That's the word that I would use to describe these people. They would melt back into the background as soon as they knew that they had accomplished their job of getting you agitated or kicked out.
Thank you.
They knew what they were doing.
Thank you, Senator McDonald. Next, we have Andrew Miller, followed by Robert Cushman, followed by Andrew Sito. Welcome, Mr. Miller. You have
Hello.
3 minutes.
My name's Andrew Miller. I was a poll worker on Tuesday and Wednesday. I originally applied to be a poll worker, but nobody ever got back to me. I tried twice to call the phone number for assistance. Both times I was on for over an hour on hold with no response, no way to leave a message. Let's get to it, though. Probably the most egregious one was on Tuesday evening after most of the tables had shut down. One table was still working at duplicating ballots. When I got there, there was 25 ballots that they were duplicating. One person quietly sat back and supposedly read the information, but from 6 feet away, I could not hear anything that he said. The other worker was filling in the ballot while being hunched over it, and there was another worker at the end of the table so that I could not see what was on the table. I had duplicated a ballot earlier that day. It was quite open. It worked well. I was asked by a table supervisor to participate in it. The ballot was stained. We worked through it. Everything was cool. We went to this one, and they were duplicating it, and I told the table manager that I needed to see those results, and he said I couldn't. And I said, why not? This is my job. I need to be able to see what the differences are between these two. And he said, no, duplicating ballots is just like voting. It's a personal endeavor. and I was not allowed to look at it. I stayed there for 4 ballots, and it all happened the same. I asked to challenge the ballots, and he said he would not be doing that. What else is there? Okay, I am also an engineer, so let's get to some of that. Every computer on Tuesday morning had an error code in the right-hand corner that says update was overdue. It was flashing on every single computer I looked at. I looked at least 20 of them. Also, about a third of the computers had the wrong time. At 10 a.m. in the morning, about a third of the computers said 2:59 p.m. I don't know how they keep track of when things are occurring when the time on the computer is not even correct. On Wednesday, I walked up to a table, and one of the computer operators was logging in, and she logged in as an admin. So she had full authority to do anything she wanted into that system. Did everybody in that facility use the admin in order to log into the computers? I also saw the routers with high amount of transferring and work when there was nobody even monitoring the copy machines that were collecting the ballots. Nobody was at the computers, but there was a lot of data going across those. I also was harassed by a number of people. At one table, there was...
Sir, I forgot to give you your 1-minute warning, so I'll give you some additional time.
I'm pretty much done, but
please, 30
just
seconds.
the harassment from, there was a table worker, then there was a Democrat worker, then there was me, and the table worker said that I needed to back up because I was too close and I did not have the 6-foot distance. But there was a person between her and myself that was a Democrat challenger. A lot of this could go away if you had one Republican at each table. I applied to be a worker. You've heard here multiple people applied to be workers, and we are all denied that. So instead of having these hearings, why don't we have a clean process? It would not fix the computer glitches that came through, but it would fix a lot of this other issues.
Thank you. Any members have a question? Senator Tice.
You said you applied to be a poll worker. When did you apply?
More than a month before the election.
So well in advance of the training, because
Oh, yes, it was before the training.
Okay, because we heard from the clerk in Wayne County that the people who applied that were denied were people who applied too late and the training had already been done. So I
No,
just wanted to clarify.
there was still training scheduled when I applied.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you for your time today. Did you submit your testimony in writing by any chance?
My affidavit contained
Okay.
everything that I had except for the admin.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have Robert Cushman, and he'll be followed by Andrew Sito, followed by Shane Trejo. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee, Mr. Cushman. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Senator McBroom, Michigan legislators, and fellow citizens. My name is Bob Cushman. I'm a registered voter in Lyon Township, and I desire to testify concerning events in Detroit on November 4th, the day after the election. I believe that I witnessed evidence of mass election fraud on the morning of November 4th and the evening of November 4th, but I'm only going to talk about the morning right now. While I served as a trained and credentialed election challenger at the Detroit Absent Voter County Boards, TCF Center, Detroit. I arrived in the county boards at approximately 6:30 a.m. after being briefed in room 260. We'd been advised of a very large ballot drop, approximately in the vicinity of 4 a.m. Night shift observers had indicated that about 61 boxes had been delivered. I began observing the process of ballots at several counting boards. I quickly noticed that none, and I mean none, of the names were being scanned from the ballots were in the electronic poll books. All of the names that were found in the supplemental sheets. We know that the poll books, the electronic poll books, were updated on Sunday, November 1st. That meant that all of these new ballots had to have been brand new registered voters on Monday, November 2nd, or Tuesday, November 3rd. I found it very hard to believe that tens of thousands of people had registered in just 2 short days. So I began writing down the names on the ballots immediately after they were scanned by the computer poll worker. As soon as I began, I was severely obstructed by 5 different persons that I could no longer, such that I could no longer continue my legal responsibility as a poll challenger. These 5 persons comprised of a poll worker, a supervisor, an uncredentialed person, a Democrat challenger, and one of the top leaders of the AVCB. The details can be found on my affidavit. Does anyone believe that 30 or 40,000 new voters were actually signed up legally in 2 days? I implore every member of this board to protect the Constitution. I implore you to give us a full forensic audit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cushman. Does any member have a question? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Cushman. Did you submit your testimony in writing as well? Mr. Cushman, can you give us the testimony, a copy in writing as well? Thank you very much. Next, I have card for Andrew Sito, followed by Shane Trejo, and then Linda Brandis. Andrew Sito,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. You have 3 minutes.
So my job was to be stationed at the TCF Center. I was in the middle of the room near the duplicate ballots. There's a table full of duplicate ballots. Throughout the whole night, I witnessed theft of duplicate ballots. My job was to follow them back to their tables of the counting boards, and where they would just take stashes of ballots, 4 or 5 ballots, take them to the table. I would stand there for 4 or 5 minutes. They wouldn't make any duplicates, never followed any duplicate procedures. They stashed them under their boxes, never put them in the bins. But couldn't do much about it, just write incident reports about it, which are documented. So, and then we had a new shipment announcement by Mr. Baxter at 4:30 a.m. on the microphone. He's saying, hey, we're going to have some ballots coming in. So these boxes of ballots were brought in by Mr. Baxter and his team at 4:30 a.m. from the rear of the room of the TCF Center. So approximately, I witnessed them bringing in boxes from the rear end of the room into the room. This is between 4:30 and 5. I estimate around 84 boxes placed on tables in the center of the room, each box with approximately 600 ballots, totaling to approximately 50,000 ballots, equal to the 2 rounds before. Because we were there from 10 to 1, we did a round about 50,000, and then 1 to about 4, a second round about another 50,000, and then this last round, all you have to know is it was the same amount of ballots from the other 2 rounds. I'm not sure if they were all brought in from the back, because I think they were commingled and also brought in from other rooms. So I'm not sure how many ballots were brought in from the back and then from the other areas, but they were put in all. It was just about the same amount. So most volunteers left at 5 a.m. and the poll workers had a shift change between 5 and 6 a.m. I stayed. At 6 a.m., Mr. Baxter and the management got back on the microphone and yelled, "This is what democracy is supposed to look like," in front of everyone with the new shift. Right after that, the whole room cheered, and you can tell that there was not a balancing in the poll workers there, even at that shift. Based off my sampling, because I was
1 minute.
Okay, sampling off of the dozen of the duplicate ballots from 6 to 2 p.m. 2 p.m. the next day, none of those were for Trump. The other 2 rounds, I only saw 1 for Trump. 3 other challengers told me they witnessed the same sampling. I challenged ballots, all refused. Challenging procedure never properly carried out. Never issued challenge ballots, no track or remedy, no record. I resorted to writing incident reports. Poll workers changed duplicate ballots to straight Democrat tickets. That's why you see in the tabulators 2 different tickets. I witnessed employees filling in bubbles for the Democrat straight ticket. And so at the tabulator, I also witnessed what the Dominion employee said with the re-rendering of the ballots. I saw that several times. At 2 p.m., I left the room for 5 minutes. Right after I left the room, they blocked it out, covered the windows up. I couldn't get back in for exceeded COVID capacity. I called the federal prosecutor, I called the FBI, made a report, I called the Secretary of State fraud tip line, I called Detroit Department of Elections multiple times, and there was no answer.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I have a quick question. When it comes to the duplicate ballots that you were in the middle of the room watching, those are blank ballots for the purpose of refilling out when necessary?
Yeah.
And so you were solely in charge of watching those?
There's a few of us, but there's too many tables, so when people would come and grab ballots, and for example, if there was like a coffee stand or something, which I never saw that night, they all looked like clean ballots, we would follow them back, and there would be several people in line waiting to follow that person back. And so once that process was done, I would come back to the center table and wait for the next person to come in.
What's your recollection, with the group of ballots that came in at 4:30 and you stayed and began observing, and you say that, there was almost every one of them or all of them were for Mr. Biden. About how many ballots would you say you observed at that point?
That shift, probably my sampling is over a dozen of duplicate ballots. And also we had some issues where we were making duplicates of the duplicate ballots. And when I asked the employees why we were making duplicates of duplicates, they confirmed to me that this is a duplicate of a duplicate, but the tabulator said unknown reasons.
So they were throwing away their first duplicate to replace it with a second one was what was, okay, but so you're saying you observed several dozen ballots in that time?
That one shift from the 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., I sampled about a dozen duplicate ballots, yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Vice Chair Lucido.
I appreciate you coming out, and I appreciate everybody being so patient to go through this process. At the end, your testimony has been submitted to us by way of written, or is there affidavit?
Yes, affidavit is submitted.
Perfect. These ballots that were brought in the middle of the night, early morning, whatever you want to call it, where did you see this go to? I'm looking at these numbers here, 84 boxes, 600 each in each box, over 50,000 ballots. Where did these ballots go?
They were just processed just like any other round. So they brought in from the back, which...
In sleeves, again,
Yeah, so-
mail sleeves? What I mean by that, you know what I'm talking about, the
Yeah,
mail
banker
boxes.
boxes with sleeves over the banker boxes. The sleeves were removed. They opened up the lids and they placed them on about 10-foot tables.
Yep.
There's about 7 of them, and they placed about maybe like a dozen boxes per table, 10-foot tables. Banker boxes pulled, with the width so they can place them out, and the ballots are facing towards you, and they were double stacked, filled to the top. Each bundle is about 50 ballots. So maybe like 150, 300 stacked on top, each box.
Did they, after they put them on these 10-foot tables, were workers taking the ballots and then putting them into the machine?
Yeah, so that's when Mr. Baxter said, this is what democracy is supposed to look like. Then they came in and took the ballots, the employees took the ballots, took them back to their processing tables, and everyone just did it at once. And most of the Republican workers were gone at that time.
50,000 roughly, right?
It was the same exact amount as the 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. round and the 1 a.m. round to 4 a.m. round.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you see anything else after that period of time? Did you stay on? You stayed on till in the morning hours?
I stayed in until I was kicked out. They said, you can leave the room for a snack. I left the room for a snack, and immediately they closed it down.
What time was that?
Around 2 p.m.
Okay. So you were there 4 o'clock in the morning all the way?
Yeah, the whole shift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Did you or anyone you know ask where the origin of the late-night ballot delivery was? What precincts it came from?
I did not ask. However, the person right next to me grabbed me by the, pulled me to the side and said, I see a truck at the loading dock coming in the back of the TCF center. And by the time I looked, Mr. Baxter and his management team were personally holding in boxes and carrying them in to the tables.
Senator Tice.
The other deliveries, they didn't come in this way?
No, this delivery was unlike every other that I witnessed from the other 2 rounds. Yeah.
Thank you.
No further questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
No problem.
Next, I have Shane Trejo, followed by Linda Brandis, followed by Bill Carzon. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee, sir. You
Hi
have
there.
3 minutes.
My name is Shane Trejo. I'm going to be reading a little bit from my sworn affidavit and giving additional testimony, and I'll submit all that after the fact. I'm a registered voter and a credentialed poll challenger in the state of Michigan. I was a GOP poll challenger at the TCF Center Absentee Voter Counting Board in Detroit, Michigan, on election night Tuesday from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. I was there at approximately 3 to 3:30 a.m., and I saw the huge dump of ballots that were delivered to the counting hall. I noticed that the City of Detroit Clerk's office there was their emblem on the white van that showed up with the ballots. Janice Winfrey's name was on there, and a number presumably for Janice Winfrey's office. I estimated that it was over 50 boxes that I counted, and I estimate that up to 1,000 could have been fit in each box, large boxes. There was no chain of custody. There was no accountability. There was no transparency. Nobody knew where these ballots had been. They had to be turned in at 8 p.m. They showed up at approximately 3:30 a.m. So 7.5 hours is a long time for these ballots to be kind of in limbo, not with anyone knowing where they are. There have been no answers up to this point, and whistleblowers are being intimidated. There is a campaign of terror that is being instituted by people such as Attorney General Dana Nessel to coerce public officials into certifying the vote and rubber stamping this insanity as quickly as possible. Keep in mind that you could not videotape at TCF. It was strictly prohibited, potentially a criminal act. That's why all of these sworn affidavits, there's hundreds and hundreds of them, are so important, because they are the key proof that severe impropriety took place in Detroit on election night. So all we want is a proper, thorough, independent investigation into what the hundreds of whistleblowers are coming forth and saying, with a forensic audit of all the suspicious ballots. We know what these investigations would yield, and we suspect that the interests desperately trying to obstruct the investigations, I think we know I think they know what would be found as well. So I implore you to do the right thing, and for your country, for your family, for your conscience, and stop this fraud. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any members have a question? Well, thank you very much for your time today. Next, I have Linda Brandis, followed by Bill Carzon, and then Christy Klamer. Linda, are you here or nearby? Well, many of you have waited a long time, I know. We'll keep on going through the pile here. Linda Brandis? Okay. Bill Carzon, are you here? Mr. Carzon, I presume? Welcome
Yes,
to the
Bill
Senate
Carzon.
Oversight Committee.
Yes,
You
thank you
have
very
3
much
minutes.
for having me here to speak. I'm a resident of Wayne County, registered voter, poll challenger, was registered at the TCF Center. I was at the TCF Center from November 3rd, 10 p.m. till November 4th, around 5 a.m., so I was there during the observation of the ballots that came in that have been discussed many times. I was made aware of the process, obviously, with the counting board tables, so I did witness some things with ballots taken to tabulators and run. Some cases, they were run multiple times. Of course, there's a zeroing out. It wasn't always obvious to see how that was done completely. I witnessed on at least one occasion where operator number 5, who basically carries the ballots over to the stations for tabulation, was handed back a ballot. Didn't fully understand at that point why that would possibly be, because those are to be returned into the secure boxes. I would say between 1 a.m. and 4 in the morning, roughly, it was very quiet. It was a very big lull in the overall center. Many people can attest to folks with heads on tables. This was on not only the polling stations or the absentee ballot stations, but also at the tabulator table areas. In fact, I witnessed some person on a tabulator screen playing a card game. I sat there with my son, who was also there as a poll challenger, and another acquaintance as we watched this. So to give you the sense, there was a big lull. Around 4 o'clock, 3:30, I think I've heard 4 o'clock, is by my estimation. There was a delivery, I would estimate, because the table in the center next to the main stage is where the ballots were brought to. Somewhere at least 60 boxes were brought in. They did have a wrap around them, which was very, what I expected to be standard. When that work was basically prepared for people to come up and get it, the person called up and said, come and get your extra work. They were called up by precincts, and then, you know, those groups would come in small sections and take these back and then, you know, run them to their table. So just to give you a feel for that environment and what was taking place. I was also taking the opportunity, because of the canvassing that was taking place, I was at the canvassing board meeting that Monica Palmer spoke about earlier, and I will just tell you, it was extremely hostile. It was very personal. It was very aggressive with regards to the threats that were made to her personally, her family.
1 minute left.
Yep. And I would just say that really didn't have any place, and nobody shut that down. It was high intimidation. And Mr. Kinloch, or his other representative on the Democratic side, made no comments to calm this down. So when the vote was taken to not certify, of course, there was a side discussion that actually had some other further developments that everybody's aware of. You know, I would just say nobody talked about the fact that they had so many out of precinct locations. When the meeting began, a pile of affidavits were set on the table. Mr. Kinloch said they were received by himself in that day. They really weren't used, reviewed, or anything, just submitted to minutes. So really no benefit in providing that. The meeting was delayed by 2 hours to start, a very strange delay. As Monica said, there was no executive summary. The numbers were rattled off regarding out of balance. I would just say it was a very hostile environment, and the main takeaway from my side is, I think you guys know, an out of balance precinct can't be recounted. That doesn't make any sense. If it's out of balance, it should be.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Senator McDonald.
Thank you, sir. Sir, were you given any guidelines at all on how to do the work properly? Was there a chain of command of any type that you saw?
Yeah, there were, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that was
I
the
thought you were
question.
talking about information we received.
Yeah, was there a
beforehand.
chain of command? Were you given any guidelines whatsoever on how to do the work effectively?
There was information that was provided. Some people could watch video sessions that were provided with some information. There was some written material that was provided. So to some extent, and I heard about the on-site location activity, that was not extended as an opportunity to us, but we did get information and training and material that could be looked at to understand the process, yes.
So there was a semblance of organization?
With
Was it
regards
sounds
to the-
completely disorganized. Was there even a semblance of organization at all within
I
the
thought you were referring to my or our information to be a poll challenge.
Yeah, your witnessing of the poll challenge, was there any organization, even a semblance of organization?
So I personally was on table number 18
Okay.
mainly, and then I walked around. That table did a fairly, I think, consistent job. There were times where, you know, poll worker, the person operator 1 to operator 2 may not have confirmed a number and name on the ballot, the scan and the handoff and this kind of closed loop process. I did witness that at other tables also being missed. You know, when there was a 3-hour lull with people literally with their heads on the table, there was a lot of downtime there. And this wasn't just at the tables, this was right down the tabulator station too. And then at 4 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock, when that truck hit and the other work came, now I wasn't there after at 5 or so, as that's when we left, that these were counted, but I mean, there was a big lull there, so not very organized and structured. If a person can sit there and play a card game on a tabulator screen, clearly there's something missing in the organization.
Well, again, it's very troubling, but thank you for that information, sir.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Senator Lucido.
Thank you very much for being so patient. I don't want you to run so fast. I wish your gut reaction when you were there at that time of the morning and seeing these ballots coming in and not seeing any other ballots around for 2-3 hours before that, right? What was your feeling, or what was it that you made any reference to about those ballots?
Well, it was my first experience to be down there and be a poll challenger. I'm more involved in this year's cycle than I had been before. So for me, it was novel. I didn't know why they would be there. I started stepping back and asking myself, why would things close at 7 and 8? And then at 4 o'clock in the morning, this proliferation of ballots would arrive. So I just had questions that just didn't seem to make sense from that perspective, but I think others maybe want to make comments as to why those were so late.
Are those boxes consistent with what you've heard the testimony? You were sitting here during the testimony earlier. Was all the boxes of ballots that were delivered to the TCF, you didn't see if they came in the back door? You didn't see?
I went to the back door when they came in, so I did see the truck. I did see them being unloaded. I saw a gentleman with a dolly that would bring some of them. I actually took the time to walk over to the tables in the center to watch them get stacked. I counted, I did a rough estimation because the tables were basically mostly empty. So I was able to get a general idea of how many were brought in at that time. And then at 5 o'clock, we were pretty much done with what we were doing that day.
Thank you very much. We have to leave, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for being patient.
Yep, you're welcome.
Myself and Senator Irwin have another committee meeting for Judiciary and Public Safety.
Come back when you can.
We sure will.
Senators, thank you. Was that just Bill Carzon that we had? Or I'm sorry, thank you. Next, we have Christy Claimer, followed by Grace Norris, followed by Jeffrey Gorman. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So my name is Christy Claimer. I'm a registered voter from Oakland County. I was a poll challenger at TCF on November 3rd from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and November 4th from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 a.m. and November 5th. I was there for a total of 35 hours. In those 35 hours, I experienced the chain of custody being broken in many different ways. I'm going to focus on 3 of them. Around 7:30 a.m. on November 3rd, over the microphone, everyone was asked how many Republican poll workers there were by a show of hands. When announced there were 2, I looked around and couldn't see any hands going up from where I was sitting. Not having at least one Republican poll worker at the 134 tables made it impossible for ballots to be duplicated legally. Also, there were no Republican poll workers to see the ballots being secured at the end of the process as well. Almost all the poll workers were told that they could go home at 11:30, this is on November 4th, p.m., even though none of the ballots were secured until hours after that. Tables with ballots were left unattended and not secure. And even at the end of the night, when they were pretty much wrapping up, I started going through every single one of them, and there was 8 that were locked, but they were not locked. We made sure they were locked. I think it was unintentional, but concerning. Also, I witnessed 46 ballots get put in manually, meaning they were not in the electronic system and they were not in the paper poll books. I recorded each name and ballot number along with how they had the birth date of 1/1/1900. I witnessed majority of these ballots being entered between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. on November 4th. I was unable to challenge a ballot due to the consistent intimidation, harassment, and verbal attacks throughout the day. This came from Democrat challengers, independents, a lawyer, team leaders, supervisors. I was threatened to be escorted out by a Democrat lawyer. I have a very different perspective on how secure our elections are, experiencing all that I did. It's very disturbing and disheartening. As you've heard today, there is much credible evidence that the chain of custody was broken time and time again, which created an election with no integrity. Michigan citizens are needing to trust our election system and our state. We are asking for a fair and honest election to be certified. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Claimer. Any members have a question? Oh, thank you very much. You've submitted your testimony in writing? Okay, thank you. Next, we have Grace Norris, followed by Jeffrey Gorman, followed by Jennifer Seidel. At the top of the hour, the chairman will take a 5-minute break for everybody, and I'll read off who's on the deck after that this time so we can be sure to expedite coming back to order. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee, Ms. Norris. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a challenger at TCF Center from November 4th to November 5th, and I'm a registered voter in Ingham County. You all can tell that I'm a new citizen. I love to learn things, and I love this country. So that's why I became a poll challenger. So I received my credential and waited in line since 12:37 p.m. November 4th. And so I wasn't allowed to get in there until 6:20 p.m. on the 4th. So many others were not allowed in there either. So that's number one. Number two, I walked to table 14, introduced myself as a poll challenger, and I wanted to ask, were there any Democrats or Republicans or nonpartisan independents? And the table manager told me, you can ask them, and nobody said anything. And they said, send away. So I felt, okay, well, that's kind of a little bit hostile. So number three, so when I walked around at 8:40 p.m. on the 4th, I saw a name appeared on 2 monitors. And why I paid attention, because that was a military ballot, and I saw later, and that's why I remembered this, this name. And then the fourth thing was the printing of the remarks and the voter list at the end of counting took as long as 4 hours. So the last shift was supposed to end by 9 p.m., but some of the prints did not get done until 1:30 a.m. on the 5th. And so one table had a gentleman tried to print a dozen times and failed, so he got so frustrated and he put his backpack on and just left without signing anything. So that's the fifth scenario I saw was.
1 minute.
Okay, thank you. So at about midnight, people called in and told them if they couldn't say they could leave. So sometime later, there were only like 2/3 of the people left. So the other thing I counted as, how many workers at each table left at that time. So I have the details, but I don't mention it here. So seventh, so one of the male Democrat poll challengers kept talking about, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. We were not supposed to talk politics. And eighth, some of the limit strip on the ballot cases were not put on, and some some postal mailbox were left open there, and that was concerning. So then I tried to, the last thing was, I was writing down the SEO number, and then 2 Democrats stood, blocked my view, and a supervisor came over, grabbed my credential, and took photo and just left. So that's how I was treated. I hope that we had that process, so people can trust the system, and I came here for freedom and for liberty, but this was so disappointing. And I hope that our legislators will do something, make better policy to fix up the loopholes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time today and your testimony. Any questions?
Just very
Senator
quickly.
Tice.
Grace, it's amazing to see you. Thank you for all that you've done. She has worked her tail off for American integrity and elections. So I just wanted to say thank you. I know personally your efforts, and I very much appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I love this country. I hope all of us love this country.
Okay, we'll have time for one more, and then, like I said, the chair will take a break. So right now, we're looking for Jeffrey Gorman. Please come forward. And then on deck for after our break will be Jennifer Seidel, Jasmine Early, and Artisha Bomer. Mr. Gorman, welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Jeff Gorman. I live in Wayne County, in Garden City. Born and raised in Michigan, spent most of my life away from here, left when I was 17, came back 9 years ago. I was a retired Navy captain, retired airline pilot, and captain as well. And so integrity is very important to me because lives depend on it. I also went to a college where we had an honor concept, so we kind of frown on lying, cheating, and stealing. Well, I volunteered to be a poll challenger on the day after the election. Welcome Alice to the belly of the beast. It was a hostile environment from the Democratic lawyer that told me I didn't know what I was talking about when I was challenging, to I was briefed on 2 things to look for. One was when they were doing duplicate ballots, there was supposed to be a Republican and a Democratic witness. When they were doing the military ballots, I asked, where's the Republican witness? And they said, it's you. And I said, no, it has to be a paid worker. She says, well, I don't know what they are. The supervisor did, I don't know what they are. Ask him. So I asked him. The poll worker said, well, I ain't going to tell you. So it was obvious. I challenged it. They only, out of the 8 to 10 that I saw, they only took the challenge for the first one. They wouldn't record the challenge for the other ones. And the other thing I was told to watch out for was ballots that the name of the voter did not appear in the electronic or the supplemental. They had 2 that came in that met that criteria. They sent them back. They came back to the table again, so they raised the red flag to ask the supervisor, whatever the person's name is that was supposed to come in. She told them, oh, well, we checked these. These are on the list, so I'm going to show you how to get them and enter them in to the computer so that they appear, and then we can tabulate this. And they used the fictitious 1900 birth date in it. So I was only there for 2.5 hours. That was after, in the hostile environment. I got there at 12:30. Tried to go in at 2 o'clock. They wouldn't allow us to come in, even though we know Republicans, poll watchers had left, and they need to be replaced. They wouldn't let us in until 6 o'clock is when I got in. At 6:06 in Book 1, I was recorded. Left at 8:30. For those full 2.5 hours,
1 minute.
I watched violations of the rules that I was told to watch out for. Now, I said about my jobs, integrity was important because lives depended on it. Well, it's no less any important that we have integrity in the election because the life of the country as a democratic republic depends on it. This nonsense has got to stop. We got to take the steps that it takes that the legislature can take to make sure that we have fair elections, because I've never seen anything like this before. And like I said, this goes against my grain and everything that I know as a person, as a professional. And like I said, I don't want to ever see anything like that again.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any members have questions? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gorman. Again, we'll be hearing next from Jennifer Seidel, Jasmine Early, and Artisha Bomer. And I beg everyone's indulgence in a 5 to 10 minute recess. Thank you.
All right, that wraps up session 2 here in Lansing, Michigan. About a 5 to 10 minute break before they resume some testimony. We want to thank our partner of the day, which is a great guy, great company, Mike Lindell over at MyPillow.com. We know that getting a restful night's sleep right now is crucial to waking up on the right side of the bed. And with this Christmas just around the corner,